I am going to call this meeting to order with a moment of silence and then a salute to the flag. And tonight's moment of silence is dedicated to our educator, Georgia Arvantes, who most recently was at the Healy. She's been a dedicated educator in the Somerville schools, as she's been at the Powder House, East Somerville, Winter Hill. She's known for her kindness and her dedication to her students. And so our thoughts are with her family, her friends, and her students. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And Superintendent, before I ask you to call the roll, I'm going to remember to read the statement at the top of the meeting, which is pursuant of the Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, GLC 30A, S18, and the Governor's March 15, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather on one place, as well as Mayor Curtatoni's declaration of emergency dated May 15, 2020. This meeting of the Somerville School Committee will be conducted via remote participation. We will post an audio recording, video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of these proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting on the City of Somerville website and local access government channels, SCAT. So with that, Superintendent, will you call the roll, please?
Certainly, Madam Chair. Dr. Phillips?
Here.
Ms. Krepshin? Here. President McLaughlin? Mayor Curtatoni? Mr. Green?
Here.
Ms. Barish?
Here.
Ms. Batone?
Present.
Dr. Ackman?
Here.
Ms. Norman?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you so much. So tonight the school committee will be deliberating and voting on the reopening plan. And in these incredibly uncertain times, I know we would all like definitive answers and definitive schedules. And it would be unrealistic for me to say, okay, here, we're going to do that. What we are voting on tonight is a plan that gives us the flexibility to respond to essentially the virus. We're in a pandemic. That will be the driving force. And also there are other deciding forces. The school committee will take a final vote tonight, but there are other decision-making points. There's the Department of Health and Human Services and the mayor's office on the ability for COVID testing and the condition of our buildings. We also need to have successful completion of negotiations with our unions. So the plan is robust, and it's designed to be able to be responsive to the opening, high school buildings coming online if we're not able to bring them all online, and what the virus may be doing. And so with that, Superintendent, I would ask you, I'm just going to ask the Superintendent to do an update before we go to public comment, because I think it would inform, or it may inform some of the comments here tonight. Superintendent Skipper?
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. So I wanted to start by just with a sincere thanks to the community around the patience that we know this is taking. I think when we set out to do this plan, we wanted to do it well, and we wanted to do it based on the information we had. And different than what has happened in other places where a plan has been presented and then things have to change, that becomes even harder for parents when they start planning for one thing and then you end up switching to another. So I think what we've been really trying to do is to use the information we have, and we don't have all the information. So where we don't, we say pretty transparently, we're waiting on the information, we're trying to gather it, and where we do, we use it as actionable data and we try to make a plan. So that said, I think the first thing is the plan itself. So what you'll see posted and what is, posted on the school committee notes is the plan right now. We call it a living document. And the reason we call it that is because we anticipate that there will be some changes as negotiations happen, as things happen from DESE and we get different guidance, as the state gives different guidance. I'll use sports as an example where that's evolving, and over the next week, there's going to be additional information coming out. Our goal is to update that plan. So that's the one place that the community can go at any time to be able to see what we're thinking and what we're planning to do. That can be cumbersome when you're looking for changes. So Susanna Morgan and Rebecca Granger, who are the ones updating the plan, they are coming up with sort of a color scheme to be able to easily identify in the document what is changing. And then on the second page of the document, they're actually keeping track of the date and what changes for the community, so that at quick glance, you'll be able to see it. Similarly with the PowerPoints, PowerPoints tend to be static documents. They happen in a moment in time as a presentation. And when you look at it, you don't always realize that other things have transpired or changed. So we're having some conversation about how best to update the PowerPoint so that it is to a living document, so that anybody looking for sort of the short read is able to go into it and be able to look at it. So we're hoping on the PowerPoint piece to be able to come up with a recommendation for that for next week for the posting. I start by thanking everyone for the patience, because I think, part of this is that there are still some unknowns. And over the next several weeks, we're going to be making some decisions based on information that's going to be coming in. And some of our panelists will be speaking to that tonight. One thing I did want to make clear is that right now for parents, they don't need to take action. Everyone's going to be enrolled in a hybrid that allows them to have the access to the in-person education when we're at the point to be able to bring people back safely. And at that point, if parents want to continue all remote and do so, they will also be given that choice. But right now, since we're beginning all remote, you don't need to make that choice. The only parents that may need to make a choice right now are the parents who have actually reached out to us and sort of said, we really appreciate all you're doing, but we sort of have an academic plan for our kids. We've hired a tutor or tutors. We have a pod. We have some parents that are going to be rotating in. We have some real academic supports for the kids, and we want to be able to stay aligned and look at the standards and have some pacing. But we're really not interested in the live teaching piece. We're really not interested in following a synchronous schedule. So is there a solution for us? And so one of those solutions is a learning management system. You've heard us refer to this. So for those parents in that particular situation where they've got that support in place, we will offer the ability, and Mr. Mazza will go into this in a little bit more detail in a bit, but we'll offer that opportunity to choose the two LMSs, one at the high school level and one at the K-8 level. We will purchase the license, and we will probably put some tutoring in place for that. But that is really for that group of parents who have sort of made that decision already, and that's the direction they want. For the vast majority of our parents, they don't need to do anything. They're going to be in the hybrid, and at that point of decision making, they will have full choice to continue remote with support from SPS teachers, instructionally, synchronous, asynchronous teaching, or to continue in the hybrid where they have the opportunity to send their students back in person. We anticipate this week coming out with the form for parents who, again, want that learning management, and that's what they really want, to be able to fill that out and to be able to submit that to Mr. Maz's office. He will have a conversation with those parents, so we make sure that that's the fit they're looking for, and then we will begin them down that road of that journey. If the parents, and again, we're thinking these are a very small group of parents, want to come back at any time from the LMS, come back into the support with SPS educators with our curriculum, who know it and know how to teach it, they can do that. They can opt back in. But if that fits them and that's what they want, we wanted to give those parents the flexibility that they asked for. So what we've tried to really do is to design this so that parents right now don't need to feel anxious and stressed about the choice. They will be in the hybrid, and again, no choice taken away from them. at the point of time, we can come back in person. They can continue to go remote with SPS teachers, or they can come back in person and do the 2-day hybrid as we've laid it out, Monday, Tuesday, or Thursday, Friday. That hybrid is what you're voting on tonight, and that is what we are designing our supports around. It is what we're designing our rec and community school supports around. It's what we're designing the schedules around. Okay, so just to kind of set that at the beginning, because I know for a lot of parents that can be confusing. And as educators, we throw all these terms around: synchronous, asynchronous, hybrid. It's a whole new language that's been invented for this. And so don't hesitate to reach out as a parent if you have questions on that. Mr. Maza, myself, your principals will be able to answer those questions. The second thing I just want to address is the phasing, because I think the phasing has been a source of frustration. Why can't you put dates to the phasing? And it's a good, legitimate question. And the reason is because when we step back and we think about why are we starting all remote, we talked about it being about safety and health at the start. And safety and health had several criteria. The first being our buildings. We were very transparent. Some of our buildings are newer, some of our buildings are not. We entered into a process that I'm going to actually ask Mr. Raish to go into in a moment, but we went into that process in order to look at our buildings and ensure that the ventilation and the filtration were up to the standard that we needed to bring students and staff back safely. The second was our COVID testing. And that was, our mayor said really clearly, and our health director, Doug Kress, said really clearly at the beginning, we need a testing system for COVID in place so that we know what the virus is doing in our immediate school community. Those two things take time. They're not something that school districts and cities can put in place quickly, but they're very important to being able to say to parents that we are bringing students and staff back in a safe environment. We are working very hard on them. We are making progress on them. But part of the challenge of not being able to put a date to when, say, phase 2 could start is that we need to have the updates on them to know what needs to be resolved and how long it will take. So over the next several weeks, we are looking to get those updates, again, working very hard on them so that we can then put more definitive timeline in place for what the phasing could look like. Additionally, as we've said from the start, this is about the virus. The virus determines the timeline. And as many people have seen, there's been this color chart that's come out from the state. And so I've had parents reach out and say, we're green. What is the problem? Why cannot we not go back? And, part of, I think, what our mayor and Doug Kress would say is that what the state has put out is an indicator and has a limited threshold, but it's one indicator. And it's not representative enough in our mayor's mind and in our health commission's mind to really identify what the risk is going on within Somerville and within the region around Somerville. And so, again, our health and environmental task force, along with the Health Commission, is actively working to be able to give a sense of what those indicators and what those thresholds should be for here in Somerville. And again, making progress that we hope over the next several weeks to be able to update on. And then finally, we've talked about, working conditions and unions. And that's a real part of this. That's a part of this, that in changing the working conditions, we have to work in collaborations with our unions to have something that works for all. And so that takes time, and that is something we are also actively working on. So these are the 4 things that really come together to define the phasing. And once we start to get a clearer picture over the next several weeks of these things, then we will be able to put some definitive timeline relative to the phasing. We've listed the phasing out, and so you can see clearly phase 2, we're talking about special education and ELL students, also inclusive of some UNIDO students. In phase 3, we're talking about bringing back primary, pre-K to 2, and then in phase 4, so on as we go up through the grades. So the phases are laid out, but the dates are going to be very important to put to them when we're at the point of having the information to do that. So again, patience, we thank everybody for it, but it is complex and we want to get it right. We don't want to put a time to it. We don't want to assume things and then have to backtrack. Because I think as you see across the country and you see across our state, that is happening, and it's happening on a regular basis. parents, students are thinking one thing, and then a day or two before, they're finding out something different. So we're trying to, as best we can, use the information we have. So with that, I have a couple of people, Chair Norman, I would just like to talk through a few updates for us. For school committee, there's a short notated slide deck just for your reference. Those will be slides that we will eventually include in the broader PowerPoint. But first, I would like Sarah Davila, Dr. Davila, is she on?
Yes.
She is, great. I would like her to just talk a little bit about UNIDOS, because we had some parents reach out with some wonderful questions about UNIDOS. And so we did a few changes and some updates from the input. So Dr. Davila? Mute. There you go. I think
there we go. Good evening, thank you. So actually, the UNIDOS reopening plan has been part of the EL plan from the beginning, and we've been working very hard actually since the spring in an UNIDOS Institute that has included the entire staff, as well as some district folks, myself, Ori Harel, Chad Mazza, and of course, Obed Morales, the principal, as well as two very important people, Paulina Metropolis, who is the EL program specialist, and Maureen Hughes, who's the UNIDOS program specialist. So we've been working on this plan, including this summer, where a group of teachers have been working voluntarily to develop a what's now called a digital dual language guide. You know, how do we do language instruction in the remote learning environment? And there's a couple of things that we want to make sure that it comes to the surface in our planning. One is we are committed to the UNIDOS mission, vision, and goals, no matter what learning mode we're in. And that mission is that English learners, students who are English speakers, who are learning Spanish, continue to learn in an integrated environment, share each other's language, develop the language as an English learner or as a Spanish learner, and also are studying rigorous grade level content in this language environment. And we're committed to keeping the actual learning model that we've developed, which is that the language of instruction in kindergarten and grade 1 is what we call a 70%, 30% split. So in those grade levels, all children are learning 70% of their time in Spanish and 30% in English. And then in grades 2 through 8, it's a 50-50 model. We're committed no matter whether we're phased into hybrid or remote. We believe that that model is the best model. Another important thing to think about is our priority students. And you've heard me talk about that, and it's part of the plan that we've prioritized those students that are at language levels, proficiency levels 1 and 2. They're beginners. They are our priority student for whenever it's safe to come back for in-person learning. It happens that those English learners, there's a group of them in the UNIDOS program, along with language learners that are at higher levels and English speakers who are learning Spanish. We recognize that all language learners benefit from that in-person interaction, opportunity to practice language across what we call the domains, listening, speaking, reading, and writing. So therefore, UNIDOS grades K through 2 are, because we have both English beginners and Spanish beginners, are included in our priority group for coming on site first and for having the maximum amount of in-person learning that is safe. I think that that's really the update, or the planning that has been in place that we want to bring to the surface. as parents, both of English learners and of the Spanish learners, are wondering how we're going to maximize the remote learning space now with improved instructional practices, with improved structures to support the learners, whether the target is I'm learning Spanish or the target is I'm an English learner.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. I think that we did appreciate that the parents reached out and they wanted clarification and questions, and rightly so. So that caused us to relook at it and to also look at the phasing and how the UNIDO students could be done. The phasing could be done for them differently. So thank you very much for the update.
Superintendent Skipper, will that information be incorporated into the, okay, thank you so much.
It has been. Yep, it has been.
Okay, fantastic.
Thank you. And it's on the little change sheet too. So I think
Great.
that's the little cheat sheet for that. So next, I would like Mr. Mazza, Assistant Superintendent Mazza, to just speak a little bit about the LMS piece for that, again, smaller group of parents who might want that as their choice.
Sure. Thank you, Superintendent Skipper, through you, Madam Chair. So, as we talk about the full remote learning model, the LMS, it's intended for families who prefer to keep their students solely in asynchronous remote learning with no in-person instruction for the duration of the school year and can provide supervision and academic supports for their students. The full remote learning model, again, the LMS, it would entail the use of a learning management system, which we would license through our district. Upon evaluation of 3 full remote delivery systems suggested by the state on August 4th, we will offer 2 learning management systems to families that opt for the full remote learning model, the LMS. On grades K to 8, students who engage in the LMS, they'll have the option to enroll in the Florida Virtual School. The Florida Virtual School that provides interactive curriculum that includes core courses as well as subjects such as art, physical education, Spanish, and technology. Additionally, there are scaffolds and supports built into the platform for language learners and students with special needs. We suggest that families further explore the design and option provided by the Florida Virtual School in making their decision as to whether this model, is the best fit for their students' learning. And additional information can be found on their website, the Florida Virtual School website. The high school level, we will continue to use Edgenuity as it has been in our system for several years. Edgenuity provides a full offering of core courses, which includes AP, honors, dual credit, CTE, world languages, and credit recovery. Scaffolds and supports are also built into the platform for language learners and students with special education needs. And again, families can find out more information on Edgenuity on their website and before they decide whether or not this option is the best fit for their students' needs. Now, I can tell you that students that enroll in either the Florida Virtual School or Edgenuity would still have the option of engaging in music and art classes offered by our own SPS educators and is applicable to enroll in Somerville Parks and Recreation, community schools, and youth-based in-person programs to support connections through safe and social interactions. And I think that's a very important point. And also, an extremely important point that I want to make clear, families have an option quarterly of switching between chosen learning models. We've heard from families that they prefer just to establish their own schedules and work independently, in which case working through an LMS like the 2 we described would be the best option. Again, students who enroll in a full remote learning model, with the LMS, they'll have an option on a quarterly basis to shift to the phased hybrid learning model. So for us, I will say just a couple of closing things. In no way, shape, or form does the LMS replace skilled educators that we have that deliver curriculum, deliver synchronous instruction to our students on a basis. It's more intended for an independent learning path. But again, it does not replace what our educators do offer parents. So again, I would suggest that all parents go on both websites and see if it's a good fit for what you would like for your children for the fall, at the beginning of the year. I'll be working on an application process this week. I hope to get it done by the end of the week. So that way, after you review, if it is something that you are interested in, parents are interested in, they can fill out the application and send it into my office.
That's great. I would add that, we've used Edgenuity for some time now as a means for credit recovery. We often will use it also if a student's in the hospital for a short period of time and we need to do some bridge curriculum. Generally, we'll provide some tutoring, and it's meant to be very kind of independent, self-paced. But again, that's not for every student. And, it needs to be complemented with a support system in our view. Really, we feel like the hybrid is the one that, our educators know our curriculum. They're going to be able to present it. They're going to be able to, all of the instructional materials that we're creating centrally as well will be all harnessed around using our own curriculum and pacing. So really, but we do also want to respect parent choice. And so for the parents that feel it'll work for them, we will be happy to license it. The questions also come up, well, why can't we use this other one? We found such and such a system and that looks really good. We've talked to such and such and they're using this one. Can we use that? The state went through this process, I think, for a couple of reasons. One is because in order to purchase or to use these types of learning management, you need to go through a bidding process. You have to procure them, and that takes time. And there's a limit to how much you can contract with them before you hit that limit. So what the state was doing for districts, knowing that that limit would be reached pretty quickly, was to create their own system of procurement so we could use their contract. And that's in effect what we're doing. We're using the state contract that they have at the lowest possible price. So that's the reason why we can't kind of one-off and use this system or that system. I think the other thing is that, they vetted them using a criteria, an educational criteria of how they align to Massachusetts standards. And so that becomes the question of sort of, well, how does Florida virtual, like how does that align with Massachusetts? And I think that's because a lot of these systems have developed in a way that, they've built around the Common Core. So there's like a translation of the standards through the Common Core back to the various states. And they've also in and of themselves expanded often beyond the state that they're in. So they often support a consortium of states. And so that's why you'll hear North Carolina, California, Florida, Massachusetts just doesn't happen to have its own. So that hopefully for parents kind of gives a sense of the LMS. They can reach out to Mr. Mazur at any point. He's happy to answer questions about it. And certainly as we come out with sort of the small application to use it, Mr. Mazur is just going to make sure that it's a fit and that, that the parents understand clearly what they're getting with it as opposed to the hybrid. So that will likely be this week that will come out, and we'll send it as part of the update blast. Thank you, Mr. Mazur, very much. So next I'd like Dr. Curley to talk a little bit about REX programming and CS programming. I know this is on parents' minds. If there's a source of excitement right now, it's this, because they feel that this is going to be something really positive for their kids, as do we. So Dr. Curley, I know you've been working hard on this.
Thank you, Superintendent Skipper, Chair Norman, and everyone. Yeah, so as many may be aware, we the Community Schools program, which is the district's primary after-school and summer learning provider, has been running a very successful summer camp where students have been able to come to our schools, engage in outdoor activities and projects in a safe way following Somerville's enhanced health and safety guidelines. We've learned a lot from that experience, and there's a lot that we're looking to apply both to the hybrid return, but also to these additional programs. The city's recreation department has also been running a lot of wonderful outdoor programming this summer as well. I know a lot of fellow parents who've taken advantage of both of those two opportunities. And so we want to take those learnings and extend them into the school year to give students a chance to socialize and have some enrichment time. So there will be more communication about all of this coming next week. Don't have to take really detailed notes here, but I just want to give a preview of what we're planning. So beginning September 21st, that first Monday at the start of the school year, community schools will start running outdoor programming across all of the SPS schoolyards. The programming that they will run and design will be targeting our younger students, particularly pre-KK and K-2. That we're looking to offer from 12:30 to 2:30. So it would be kind of in an early afternoon block for our younger learners. And then the typical community schools after school program would start at 2:30 as it normally would, but fully outdoors and fully in the schoolyards. We've been partnering also with the recreation department to kind of take their model that they've run over the summer and offer it to our students in parks and fields throughout the city. So that programming will be more designed around our slightly older elementary students and our middle grade students. We're looking to offer there is for students in grade 3 through 5, a chance to gather outdoors under tents in the fields from 2:30 to roughly 6. And for the middle grade students to have that same opportunity from 6 until 8. The rec department has been doing incredible amounts of work getting ready for this. That programming right now will be offered at Dillboy, Lincoln, the Healy Schoolyard, Glenfield, and Winter Hill. So we're trying to balance it out and put it in as many locations as possible. So that will be in addition to what community schools is running in the schoolyards. Again, as I mentioned, we're going to be sending more out in written communication to all parents. We expect the enrollment and the registration for these programs to open up on August 28th. The outdoor programming that REC is looking to run would begin hopefully as early as September 8th. And as I said, community schools program would begin on Monday, September 21st on all the schoolyards. Just a quick reminder, this is all going to be weather permitted programming. We're doing everything we can to get things tented, have everything ready. SPS Food Service will provide lunch and snack to all students. And you know, something I think we're excited about, I have 3 young kids. I know this is a point of a lot of stress for a lot of families. So we're doing everything we can in partnership with these great partners, community schools and REC, to offer enrichment and outdoor activities for our students. So I thank you for that chance to detail those efforts.
And I want to, publicly thank Dr. Curley because, he's always sort of asking, what is it that, I can do, we can do to make the biggest difference for students? And I think this is a great sweet spot. And I think he's been able to move this in a short amount of time. Huge kudos to the REC, to Jill and to her staff as well for just being such great team players, and to Rosanna and the community schools staff who have from the very inception asked, what can we do, not tell us what they can't. And so this really is a team effort. And again, we want to get the details right so that we don't have to change anything. So that's why we're asking that patience for a little bit longer, but to know that it's coming and some really good programming is being planned for the kids. So thank you to all.
Ms. Patel?
I apologize through you, Chair Norman. I know you want to get through a lot of material fast and get the public comment, but just a couple comments while Dr. Curley is still on the phone through you, Chair Norman. There's been questions about this programming. People are very excited about it, but they're also worried about the first come, first serve that often happens just by the design of registrations and whether or not we're going to use lotteries, as well as you probably don't know what your capacity is at this point, but consideration to that. So anything you can talk to there, I understand if you're not ready to talk to that. Thank you.
Dr. Curley, are you ready to talk to that or not yet?
Yeah, in part. So I think it's a really important and valid point. The district has done a lot over the last 3 years that I've been here to open up more after school and out of school time space. Our hope is to really build on that growth. I think we'll be able to offer through REC at least, I'm hoping, 150 student opportunities, student openings in that 3 through 5 space, and similarly that size for the middle grades, and even more given that we have a few more locations for community schools for our younger students. So that's building on top of the already, I think, about 1,000 students that are participating in after school or school time programming with the district. So my hope is we won't run into too much of the challenge of registration, but that is something that we're working to figure out. And any and all space that we can safely use and safely staff, we will look to open up opportunities for students.
We're also continuing to work with Summer Promise to be able to do some continuation of some of the remote programming that they did over the summer. And we're also working with our partners like Citizen Schools and Greater Boston Breakthrough and the Calculus Project to also offer opportunities, particularly in that 3 to 6, 3 to 7 kind of block. Where the outside lends itself, where the weather lends itself, we will maximize that as much as we can. A lot of this is the coordination of the space and the programming, which is why we have to be thoughtful about it and we have to do it well. But just so you know, it's not just rec and community schools, it's also others that we're hoping to be able to bring into the fold. So that in the winter months too, when weather tends to be more inclement, that, if we're still in some remote, then that would be like another option for the remote side of the house to be able to help students feel engaged and connected to their classmates. Okay. So thank you, Dr. Curley, very much for your good work on this. And last but not least, and then we'll turn it over to public comment, is the high school. So since we were all last together, we made a pretty significant decision based on looking at the building reports piece. And so I want to bring Rich Raish in for a moment, then followed by Principal Lagambina and Sean Callahan, who is the new director for CTE. But Rich, I just wanted you to have an opportunity. You've been a great partner on the city side with us, on the building side, to just update school committee and the public on where we are with the process, and with Somerville High in particular, what sort of led us to that decision.
Sure, thank you, Superintendent Skipper. So as you know, we've been assessing the buildings, and this first phase has two components. One is assessing the risk associated with each building and each room or each space in each building, and we've got 9 different factors by which we're assessing each one of those locations to give us sort of a weighted risk for each space, the classrooms, the gym, the nurses' rooms, and then a composite score for the building. Again, rating those from high risk to moderate risk to low risk to no risk. And to be clear, I don't think we will ever get to no risk. I think no risk is something like outside 18 feet apart. Because as the science on this, and as you might have seen in some of the articles in the media lately, is fear around transmissivity from aerosols as opposed to droplets, which travel a lot further. And I think the standards that we're trying to follow for these spaces are more akin to those in hospitals rather than general use buildings. That's the sort of risk factor that we're trying to get to. And then the second component of it is, acknowledging, what the risk is currently, is what could we do to reduce the risk in each one of those spaces. And we've got 16 different potential action items around ventilation and 3 more around touch points. And we're working with the consultant back and forth. We should have a draft ready for circulation with the reopening task force by the end of the week. But looking at the balance, most of the newer schools all have promise. Everything's sort of falling in the moderate risk range, and there's that suite of options that we have that we could enact to get them down to the low risk over a reasonable amount of time that could facilitate the reopening. In terms of the high school as it stands came in as a high risk, a very high risk, frankly, because of the existing infrastructure, and very few options on the table to improve that in the short term. And then just looking at the size of that building and the number of sort of portable units we would have to bring in, there's a realization that there would be no practical way of implementing spot mitigation strategies in all of those rooms before the new high school was even open and available to us. So I think we arrived at that conclusion that that there was really no point in trying to chase that, and that the new building would be the solution for the high schoolers, which gives us 10 other buildings then to look at in terms of what we can do to those spaces and how to use those.
That's great. And Mr. Raish, also Edgerly, because Edgerly is, at least in the area of CTE, was in that same situation, correct?
When I said the high school, I meant to mention that also included the
Right.
programs that we had temporarily down at the Edgerly. And the Edgerly sort of falls into that same general category as the high school.
That's great. Okay, thank you for clarifying that. So, I mean, I think we're hoping over the next couple of weeks to have clearer, correct, what, you know, where exactly, what kind of mitigation options we have for the buildings to be able to put into place our planning. Is that correct?
That's exactly what we're marching towards, yes.
Okay, great. I didn't know if school committee had any questions.
Okay. I'm getting a message that the bandwidth is a little taxed right now. So if you are not speaking, if you can turn your camera off and see, thank you, and see if that improves
It's
things.
disappearing. Great.
And you will all come back. Thank you. I know we have Mr. Lagambina and Mr. Callahan joining us. I also just wanted to take a moment and say to the public, the superintendent has referenced a very short slide deck of updates. They are available also in the handout. If you go to the right-hand side, it's the top document that says School Committee Updates PDF. So that is accessible to the public and will be incorporated into the one that's available on the website. Is that correct, Superintendent?
Yes, correct. Great. And so, as if building a new building wasn't enough, Mr. Lagambina, here we are with a pandemic. So, so now we have our all remote through to when the new building comes on. So we thought this would just be a chance to give just a quick update and for Mr. Callahan to also talk a little bit about the CTE program.
Sure. Thank you, Mary. I just want to start off by recognizing I know how parents and students must feel, you know, the anxiety about uncertainty. I just wanted to reassure everyone that we've been working very diligently this whole summer. You know, there's a lot to plan for, reducing class size, cohorting, planning for remote, hybrid, in-person. So there's a lot of planning to be done, but I just wanted to reassure people that we are working very hard on it. Now, with regards to remote, now that we know we're in remote, we've been planning for that. You know, we're looking at simplified class schedules. Normally, a student would have 6 classes a day. We're looking at a schedule, and all of this is subject to negotiation, but we're looking at a schedule that has reduced classes per day. So a student would probably have 3 classes today with an extended period of time for the classes. That's something that the students have been asking for. You know, going to 6 classes in a day is a lot, and so they're asking for fewer classes in a day. So we're looking to do that. That also supports the staff. The classes will be synchronous. The classes will have our regular curriculum, and that includes advanced placement classes. You know, the classes will be direct instruction, group work, presentations, virtual field trips, you know, virtual labs and simulations, one-on-one conferences, you know, all synchronous. So we know that we want synchronous, and that's what we plan to do. Attendance will be monitored, students' progress will be monitored, and all that information will be shared with parents and students. We'll have our normal grading system. We anticipate a normal grading system. It isn't going to be like it was in the spring. The schedule, you know, again, it hasn't been finalized, but we're looking for time for support, time that allows students to go, built into the schedule for them to talk to their school counselor, to talk to college and career readiness, to talk to we're looking at having mentors for each student. So there'll be time built into that, into the schedule, that will support that, and also support some common learning time for staff. So we're looking at a schedule that is supportive, that meets the needs of our students, and also meets the needs of our staff. I know that in my email last week, I said that there'll be informational sessions coming this week. And, you know, I haven't been able to nail those down yet. And talking to some parents, they want a little bit extra time on these. So we're going to plan them for next week. I will send out an email probably tomorrow, no later than Wednesday, that will tell parents when these informational sessions are next week, so that way people can plan their schedules. We have started the Chromebook distribution this week. It's going to go on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. If for some reason you're not able to pick up a Chromebook, that's okay. We understand that. We'll be planning a second round. Obviously, we want everyone to come now if they can, so that way we can get that taken care of. But we'll also plan a second round because we're going to need to give out textbooks to students and other class materials. And that just reminds me too, that if your son or daughter has materials from last year, they should be bringing it back this week, because we're going to need to redistribute those materials to people. You know, they will be sanitized before we redistribute them. So I think that's a little bit of an update on the high school. Sean Callanan, our CTE director, is going to speak now. And I just want to say, you know, I've known Sean now for a couple of months. I like Sean a lot. He's a hard worker. He's eager. He's looking to really take the CTE program to the next level. And so I'm happy to have Sean on board. Sean's been doing a lot in the short time that he's been here. So I just want to thank Sean, and I'm going to turn it over to Sean now. Sean, you might be muted.
Okay. Thank you, Sibby. Thank you, Sibby, and Superintendent Skipper, for your support. We've been working all summer, and we're excited to release our remote learning plan. So we tested a number of different digital curriculums that would provide us with textbooks, digital textbooks, lesson plans, customized assessments, video clips, PowerPoints, in an effort to support the students and our staff. This is new to all of us. And so I looked at this and demoed it from the perspective of a teacher, and more importantly, as a student. And so our programs, we're working now with our teachers to run this digital program. So in auto tech, for instance, we were paying $190 for a book. We now have curriculum for $670 for the entire program that allow our students to see video clips, have interactive exchange with our teachers, assessment. And so it's just a real good time for us to update not only our curriculum, but the way in which we do things in the 21st century. We're also working on some hands-on opportunities. Right now I'm working with advanced manufacturing and drafting to have 3D printers going home to students to print the face shields that the staff would actually wear when they come back, and the students will be working on yield and how many they can 3D print a day, and a lot of strategy to that. The other thing we're looking at is perhaps a virtual welders going home, where there's no risk, but just a lot of learning to take place. So that's a good opportunity. So we're doing everything we can to try and get back that hands-on opportunity as best we can right now. So that's the first part. The second part is exciting. It's called Somerville. It's an e-portfolio we've been working on, and that's been partially funded by the National Science Foundation. So it's gone through a lot of testing and a lot of research. And what's neat about this is Somerville is leading the charge in this. We're working with Brockton High School and a couple of other vocational schools across the state to come up with a way where we can have a daily challenge that the students can access through their iPhone or their Chromebook. So you may have seen that in the packet. I sent that picture along, and it looks like an iPhone on there. And what I like about that is it opens the barriers that are there for our students. So our students can go on Wi-Fi at a Dunkin' Donuts, McDonald's, the school parking lot, anywhere. And they have that back and forth exchange with their career education teacher. It houses all of our data on that student, from co-op experiences to not just co-op experience. I'm sorry, the word escapes me, but anyway, everything is there for 5 years. The competencies is what I was thinking. All the state competencies are there. So if you're a drafting student, let's say, all 400 competencies are there as you come in and you open up your summer folio. Your teacher will be there giving you a video challenge. You'll then do that video challenge, you'll watch it, and then you'll answer the questions, and then you may demonstrate that back. All that is stored with your competencies, your grade, and it makes a greatest hits album, if you will, for us to send out to a co-op employer. So that stays with those students for 5 years after they graduate. So now tracking them becomes easy, and those Somerville kids have something that nobody else has. At the same time, the DESE and MAVRA is watching it because they want to bring that statewide, so that we have synergy. If a student came to us from Everett or from, Revere or another community, we know exactly what their hours are, their competencies, their co-op, everything. So it's really an exciting time in that regard. So that's our second point. Our third point is the co-op coordinator we just hired. We're really working hard at getting our students out there. So I'm excited to let you know that Meg McDevitt is our co-op coordinator, and she has a history of best practice in working with this. So we're really excited to be working with her. For the next 2 months, DESE is not letting any co-op students or interns out. But I have worked with SIBI, and all co-op and all internships will now go through CTE, where we're trained to go out and look for the safest environment and where most learning would take place. So that's the co-op situation. And last is our social media and communications appointment. We have a stipend position for Grace Torino. And so she's updating the website, putting things on there like what students need to have to be a candidate for co-op. She's building a Facebook page and a Twitter page to align with the already existing Somerville Public School page. So we're working in unison with them so that when our students are working on something exciting, the teachers can send a photo with a narrative, and Grace will have that out on Facebook and Twitter in hopes that people will see all the good that we do. So we're excited about that. And again, we're aligned with Ruth and Susanna, and it's really neat to see us evolve. So that's what we have is that 4-point program. We're also sending out a letter next week to talk about, our engagement, our lessons, how we're doing this digital, offer support, and we'll have a 2-week bi-weekly assessment where parents and students will know exactly how they're doing so that we can work to help bring them up, whether it be attendance or credit recovery. So that's what I have today.
That's awesome. As you can see, despite the change of plan, there's plenty of enthusiasm and passion live at Somerville High School and in the CTE program. So thank you both, Chair Norman.
I just wanted to ask, well, it's wonderful to see both of you, and welcome, Mr. Callanan. I've gotten a number of questions for rising 9th graders. You know the word I'm trying to say. The
Orientation?
Yeah, and when they go through all the different exploratory. Thank you so much. And how will that work? Is there a short answer for that?
There is. What I'm working on now, Carrie, is trying to get the exploratory down to a half a year to get our students into their career areas earlier so that we can get to co-op all of senior year. This year, what I've done is we're going to do a career exploratory at the beginning that will be remote, in hopes that if we do get into the shops towards the second semester, that would be the half a year, the second half of the year, they would have just an amazing experience looking at these new shops. So that's why normally we'd have it at the beginning of the year. This year I flip-flopped it to get these students in to see these new programs if we do wind up in the new high school.
Thank you so much. That is definitely a question we're getting asked a lot. And Mr. Lagavina, thank you on behalf of all of us high school parents who may have forgotten about the Chromebooks and textbooks this week. The reminder is very helpful. I will see you tomorrow. Laura, do you have a question, Ms. Patone?
Yeah, it was just in that context. I think that there was some confusion about that every student at the high school should come pick up a Chromebook. Is that true?
Yeah, we're giving a Chromebook to every student. Now, if a student already has their device, they don't need to rush out and come, but every student is getting a device. That's correct. Thank you, and I want to thank Superintendent Skipper. Yeah, that's fantastic. I mean, this is something we've been talking about for a while, and we're finally able to do it. Every kid is getting their own device. We can't have technology be a barrier to some kid learning, so every kid will be provided with a device.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you for your leadership, Mr. Lagavina, and to you, Mr. Callanan. Welcome aboard. And
So good to see you both.
So Chair Norman, I think that concludes our updates.
Thank you so much. So we have we're taking things a little bit out of order. So that was the update. I just wanted to make sure that people heard it, and if it answered or might inform or change some of the public comments. So now we're going to do public comment, and then we will go back to the report of the superintendent, and they take up the deliberation and vote by the school committee members on this plan. And so who I have for public comment is Jeremy Brown, Mary Ann McPherson, Felix Rodriguez, Nora Sullivan, Barbara Halpenny, Daniel Evans, Aaron Hemingway, and Luciana Devoto. So,
Chair Norman,
yes.
Chair Norman, can I just ask? We have interpreters. If there are no public commenters who are need interpretation, may we release them?
From the notes that I got, no one indicated that they needed interpretation. So
yeah, all interpreters are logging out.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much. Good night.
Thank you, Mara.
Bye-bye.
Be well. Okay, so Jeremy, if you are out there, the floor is yours.
Hi, I'm Jeremy Brown. I'm at 234 Summer Street. First off, I wanted to say thank you to the whole school committee and everybody supporting you all, and the superintendent for all the incredible hard work. Looking sort of forward in the agenda, I wanted to note real quick our specific support for the immunization requirements. We strongly endorse that as a family. We think it's important to community safety to do that, especially this year. We also really support the notion that kids who take a year out of the school system for whatever reason have the option to return to their original schools. Our family will be probably exercising the LMS option or a homeschool option for our rising third grader. We need to learn more about what the LMS is exactly. So now that we know it's Florida Virtual, we can go do that. Thank you for that information. And we also want to sort of request that in the same sense that students will be allowed to return after a year, that a sibling preference would also be maintained for rising pre-K or K. We've got someone who'll be coming in as a kindergartner potentially in 2021. So I think that we're probably not the only family that would like to ensure that our kids aren't split across different schools if unnecessarily. That's about it for me. I'll yield the rest of my time. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Next up is Mary Ann McPherson, and then will be Felix Rodriguez. Mary Ann, you have the floor.
Mary Ann, you are self-muted. You can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Better now?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Mary Ann McPherson, and I live at 10 Grandview Avenue. My children will be entering grades 3 and 6 at the Argenziano, where I'm also a member of the School Improvement Council. I'm here tonight to request tangible and visible championship and representation from the school committee and the district in advancing citywide collaboration for how we work together to achieve our shared goals in these times. It's clear that we need to collaborate across government agencies, schools, businesses, and community residents, including students, to connect the dots of our gifts and assets. In my work life, I facilitate community-wide collaborations focused on improving the health, well-being, and equity outcomes that matter most to the people in a community. There's evidence I can share from dozens of other cities and towns that if we're able to tackle our biggest challenges as a community, addressing root causes together, that our work would pay dividends on the many specific challenges we are working on in various meetings, task forces, and work groups. What could that look like? Let's take food security as one example. This spring, there were many dedicated groups that I'm aware of, and I'm sure more than I'm not, working to address this need. They included various city agencies, the district, and individual schools, restaurant owners, and nonprofit organizations. My sense was that this was happening separately by and large. The school response and the city responses felt like different disconnected streams. Imagine what it could look like if we worked collaboratively, building on what's already working to achieve shared goals, to respond to and problem solve together in new ways. We have the pieces here in Somerville. We have agencies, incredible students, families, business, city leaders, nonprofits, and district leaders. I'd love to help move this work forward if my voice and skills can be of service while also making room for more voices. And I would ask for one champion from the school committee and one representative from the district to take this conversation to the next step. Thank you so much.
Thank you for that. Next up is Felix Rodriguez and then Nora Sullivan. Felix Rodriguez, you have the floor.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, my name is Felix Rodriguez, and I live on 35 Highland Avenue. My daughter is a new kindergartner at the Brown School. I understand the difficulty of reopening during a pandemic, and I appreciate all the work that has been done to get the schools up and running as fast as possible. One thing I'm having a hard time understanding is why the kindergartners have to start a week after the new normal start date. I have not heard explanation of why this is being done, nor I can think of any legitimate reason why this would be required. I know that on a regular year, the kindergartners do start a week later, but this is not a normal school year, and school is already being delayed by a couple of weeks. There have been multiple studies that have shown that the most important grades in a child's education are pre-K and K. Like everyone else, my child has already lost almost a full semester of pre-K, and I can't tell you how frustrating it is to see the possibility of losing even more education in this critical time. I know people acknowledge that remote learning will be harder for the younger kids and the older kids. It is going to take these kids a lot longer to learn what they normally would learn. So I would have expected, if anything, to have kindergartners starting as early as possible to help them on this transition, and instead it seems we're getting the opposite. This is made particularly worse during the summer, as during the summer, the city successfully provided camp from 8:30 to 4 every day, but now there's a lot less support during this intermediate 6 weeks between the end of camp and the start of the school year. That's a long time to spend at home. In summary, I'd like to implore the school committee to change this schedule and allow all the kids to start on the 18th without any extra delay. Thank you so much.
Thank you for that. The next up is Nora Sullivan and then Barbara Halpenny. Nora Sullivan, you have the floor.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. Good evening. My name is Nora Sullivan. I live at 8 Minor Street in Somerville. I am also a teacher at the Capuano School. I teach in ECIP, the district's special education preschool program. I teach a substantially separate class, which means that all of my students are on IEPs with identified disabilities. I am deeply concerned by the district's plan to return students with significant disabilities to in-person learning first. Unfortunately, the students who need in-person learning the most are the worst candidates for it. My students are 3 and 4 years old, but many of them are much younger than that developmentally. They will not be able to remain 6 or even 3 feet from one another or from staff members. They do not have the self-regulation skills, the body and space awareness, the receptive language, or the cognitive capabilities to understand and comply with social distancing. On the flip side, I will not be able to remain 6 or 3 or even 1 foot from them. They require toileting assistance, diaper changes, nose wipes, hand-over-hand instruction, etc. Many of my students have significant health concerns. Some of them have syndromes that cause cardiac and pulmonary complications. Many of them are born prematurely and still struggle with failure to thrive. Over the years, I have had students who require constant oxygen monitoring during rest time, G-tube feedings with the school nurse, and even hospitalization due to complications from common viruses that you and I might get over in a weekend. Additionally, as 3 and 4-year-olds, most of whom had not been outside the home until starting school, they are still building their immune systems. Recent reports show that COVID-19 infection rates in children are rising. Black and Latinx children are disproportionately impacted. Adults with disabilities have also been more severely impacted. These facts do not bode well for my students. If the district is truly committed to prioritizing the health and safety of students, families, and staff above all else, as stated in the plan, they will bring back students who can follow social distancing guidelines first and closely monitor the health and safety of those students and staff before bringing back our most vulnerable students. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next up is Barbara Halpenny and then Danielle Evans. Barbara Halpenny, you have the floor.
Oh, sorry, I couldn't get myself unmuted. Barbara Halpenny, I'm at 7 Lexington Ave in Somerville. My daughter will be a kindergartner at Winter Hill, and I, like everyone, thank everyone for the work that you're doing on this. This is incredibly complex. I'm glad there was finally a decision that we're starting one particular way. It wasn't my hope, but you know, now we know what to expect. For myself as a single parent, I'm trying to work from home, you know, got a 5-year-old to deal with. I am not able to think ahead too much about all the future phases and everything. And just wanted to say from my perspective, you know, what I need the most and what I hope is forthcoming soon is like as concrete of logistical things as possible, just so that I can figure out how I'm going to manage this and, you know, schedule work meetings and know when I need to be available to help my child on a Zoom call or whatever. And if she has an opportunity to go somewhere and do something, that's great. I'm excited about that, but it means I have to leave the house and take her. And so I need to work that into my schedule. I think I understood it was the Parks and Rec opportunity that might have a limited number of places. And so also, you know, just speaking from a kind of veil of ignorance perspective, like I would rather have the opportunity for some time than no time. And, you know, if there is a consideration of splitting spots so that instead of 150 spots, maybe there could be 300 part-time or something. Yeah, just the sooner to get details for planning, the better. And thank you for everyone for this work you're doing.
Thank you and welcome to Somerville Public Schools. Next up is Danielle Evans and then Aaron Hemingway. Danielle, you have the floor. Are you self-muted? There you go.
Hi, my name is Danielle Evans, 122 North Street. I have a rising pre-K and second grader at West Somerville Neighborhood School. I appreciate you guys taking the comments after the presentation so we could inform our questions and comments better. So a lot of my questions were answered in the presentation. I'm glad to hear a little bit more information about the in-person programming through community schools and rec. I guess one of my questions is so we don't currently do after school. So will there, I'm just kind of confused about how we get looped into the community schools program if we aren't currently enrolled in that. And if that is a complete separate thing from the after school that would start at 2:30 around the normal dismissal time. I'm a little worried that we're going to get shut out of that with the younger grades because we didn't avail ourselves to after school before this, but definitely will want the socialization and also as someone who does work part-time to have some time to do that. And also another question I had is it seems like the outdoor classroom learning kind of was taken off the table completely. I know in one of the original town halls, it was something you guys were exploring, and then we hadn't heard about it ever since then. So I don't know if that just got killed in general. It just seems like the time would be now while it's still warm out and our transmission rates are low to kind of get kids together so they can kind of gel a little bit, see their friends in person, understand, especially for my pre-K kid, to understand that the teacher is a real person and it's not like a television show or something. So that's all I have for now. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next is Aaron Hemingway and then Luciana DeToto. Aaron, the floor is yours. Aaron, are you there?
Can you hear me at all?
Now I can hear you, yes.
Okay. Sorry, the headset thing. Okay. I'm a mom to a rising 7th and 9th grader. Regarding the new rigorous schedule of synchronous learning, I welcome more rigor than we had in the spring at the middle school level, but I urge you to be cautious and swing not too far in the other direction. I think the 3 classes per day spread across 2 weeks is a great idea for the high school. I've worked from home for almost 4 years. I spent a lot of time on video calls, and I can tell you when you sit in a chair in front of a camera, it's very difficult to even get the subtle movements you get in a classroom because you sort of stiffen and stay in frame. So if the high school is only going to have 3 synchronous classes per day, middle school really should not be having more than that, and I would urge you to caution against trying to slam them all in every day. I have concerns about video cameras and how grading and attendance will be implemented in remote sessions. If you plan to use cameras for attendance, grading, or participation in extra credit points, I worry about the students' privacy. Students may be uncomfortable displaying their living space to peers. I worry about students taking pictures because it happens on our work calls and people don't know it. Cyberbullying could become an issue. Bandwidth may vary in a household or a neighborhood, and how will students inform teachers if their Wi-Fi is out? Not everyone is an extrovert. Students may feel shy or anxious to be on camera and all that. And finally, a note on platforms. The district seems to be in love with Google Classroom. Our experience was that assignments were dropped and missed even as we watched them be submitted last year. And if you're going to go with a platform like Google, it needs to have an automatic acknowledgement sent out to students and caregivers when each assignment is submitted, because otherwise it's not scalable for me to contact 5 to 10 teachers per week per student, and the teachers have so many 40 to 80 students. I just don't see how it's scalable just to manage whether assignments were received. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And our last speaker tonight is Lucy. Are you there? Lucy, are you self-muted? Can you speak up a little bit more? We can hear you, but it's a little louder would be wonderful.
Let me see.
That's
Sorry about that. Can you hear me?
perfect. Perfect.
All right.
Perfect.
All right. So I didn't prepare a statement. I just had really a couple of questions that have been bothering me a lot. So first, my name is Lucy Di Toledo. I live on 1 Franklin Street, apartment 304 here in Somerville. I have 2 students going to high school. One of them is in a transition program. The other one is going to be a sophomore. So my first question was regarding the CTE program. I haven't heard basically anything about the CTE program, but my question about the program was already answered by Mr. Callanan. So that one is okay. I understand we are gonna receive more information next week, so this one is fine. My other question, and what is keeping me from sleeping at night, is regarding what is going to happen to the students that are going to be unable to go back in person once the hybrid phase starts for medical reasons. I have been trying to figure out what it could be possibly, happening for those kids. And I heard something a little upsetting last week during the school committee meeting last Monday, and it's regarding the remote learning plan. So once the hybrid mode phase starts, and the kids go back in person to the building, my question is, will the students who will choose to stay remote for medical reasons still have the same robust planning that they're gonna start the school year, or changes are gonna happen and somehow it's going to be less than what they're having given that they are in home? Thank you. I passed the time.
Thank you. I normally, and I apologize. I usually read the whole spiel about the parameters around public comment beforehand, and I'll be honest, it's been a really long day, and I didn't, and normally we would not respond to public comment, but given the very factual nature of that question, Superintendent, would you feel comfortable addressing it? Thank you.
Certainly, and just so school committee is aware, but also for those that took their time to speak at public comment, it's our process that when a question's asked and it's as a question, because we don't answer the questions as part of public comment, we generally have staff follow up. So anyone that asked a question that you needed a response, is going to be somebody following up with you, and that's our protocol. So in terms of this question, first of all, I appreciate it. I think one of the things that we've considered and took a lot of input on was being able to ensure that students who need to stay remote, so they begin as hybrid, and then when the all remote phase is over and we're able to safely start to bring students back in person, that those students that need to continue remote can, and that they continue doing so with an STA teacher, so that they are getting the benefits of live instruction and the same rigor that they had during the initial phase of the hybrid. This is something we're actively working with STA on, in addition to the schedule pieces. And so really we have moved away from the LMS as really only for the families that kind of want that minimal support from the teacher side. So in this case, this example for the parent, this would be an example where the student would continue to work remotely for health reasons or others. And as part of that, be able to get the support of the teachers. It may not be the same teacher that they're working with, but it will be an SPS teacher that knows the curriculum to continue. So that will be a decision point when we're at that point of being able to bring students back physically. Parents will be able to make that choice of either remaining remote with SPS teachers or continuing into person and having that hybrid experience of in-person 2 days and remote those 3. So it's a great question, and hopefully that answers it. I also know that Mr. Mazza knows this parent, and Mr. Mazza will be following up after the school committee meeting with her.
Thank you for that, and thank you for tonight and the many public speakers, public commenters we've had over the last several months. It has the upside of COVID, and sometimes I'm desperate to find them, is that the participation and the attendance of public meetings has gone way up, and that is something I'd like to explore once we get through to the other side, if there's something we continue. So to my colleagues, Superintendent, unless there is anything else that you wanted to add?
No, Chair Norman, I think, the staff and I are here to answer whatever questions we can for school committee, and we wait.
Thank you for that, and thank you for the thorough presentation and the updates that you gave us tonight. So my colleagues, we have, I don't know, it's 60 some odd pages of the reopening plan that was presented us last week. I know that there has been many emails, many conversations, several rounds of office hours put together over the weekend and late last week. So there, as much as possible, we have been hearing from the community, certainly before this whole process, but very intensively in the last week. And so I will ask, I would ask for there to be a motion to consider the reopening, and then we will enter into deliberations. And if you could turn on your cameras, that would be helpful. And if we start to have questions of bandwidth again, we'll see that. Mr. Green, you have a hand up?
I move to approve the superintendent's recommendation for the reopening plan for the 2020-2021 school year.
I second it.
There is a motion by Mr. Green, seconded by Ms. Patone. I will now entertain any discussion on this proposal. Mr. Green, would you like to kick us off?
Sure. So first, I want to, as we're all going to do, because it needs to be said over and over again, I want to thank the administration for persevering through what has to have been the hardest summer of your careers. Similarly, I want to thank our educators for the work they have done and what they will continue to do. I want to thank STA for their partnership in our negotiations. I want to thank parents for their patience. I want to thank students for their patience. I want to thank my colleagues for giving up their summers. We can meet for 4 weeks in a row. And I think the end result of this is a moving target that is really good, right? I think nothing sums up the Somerville process better than between the Monday when we got the short form of the plan and the Wednesday when we got the long form of the plan, we had already adjusted to the situation and the feedback, right? We'd already realized that the remote proposal needed strengthening, robusting, and making more robust and changing, and we did it. I think that is the attitude which has driven this process from March to today. It is a process that I know tonight's vote will be the beginning of, not the end of. And it's the process that gives me such faith in this plan. And that being said, I've had questions. I want to actually say you preempted one of them with opening remarks when you made it clear how you thought the remote system was going to work. I think it's the right path, which is that we want everyone signing up for the phased hybrid unless they are going, how did Ms. Patel put it on Sunday, taking a cross-country trip to see the Grand Canyon for a year, which more power to you. But other than that, it's our belief that SPS students are best served and best taught by SPS teachers. And I appreciate the changes in the remote plan to make that clear. I appreciate the changes made to make that transparent to parents. I hope that going forward from tomorrow on, we do everything we can to make that abundantly clear to parents so they understand what we think is best for our students and are making a decision as informed way as possible, which may mean actually, in addition to the 60-page plan and a 25-slide PowerPoint, having a one-page summary for parents who aren't going to be reading 60-page pages in the middle of August. I appreciate that you took the lead on that, and I didn't have to push on that. My other question is actually informational, but I think something parents need to hear. We know that one of the tragic realities of the nationwide COVID shutdown is that reports of domestic violence plummeted. No sane person thinks domestic violence plummeted. If anything, all evidence suggests quite the opposite. But losing the contact points with teachers, with other first responders, meant that we didn't hear about it. That is a concern I have going forward. It's a concern I have particularly this summer in the Mystics, where we saw a spike in violence. And when I talked to parents there, they are worried that their teenagers not being in school full time leaves more space for more violence. So I am concerned about that mental health piece for our children, for our families, for our teenagers. But I'm also concerned about reports in the news over the weekend that that places plan to turn. You may get a call from DCF if you have low attendance in virtual school. And I know that parents are concerned about how we're going to handle attendance and what that might mean for getting calls from DCF. So I was hoping you could speak to those real concerns about our relationship with DCF and the community's relationship with mental health going forward in remote learning.
Thank you for that question. Superintendent?
Sure, through you, Madam Chair. So, I mean, it's an excellent question, Mr. Green, and I think it's honestly one of the social emotional piece and the continued connection and relationship with the kids is something that was our priority in the spring, is in the summer, and will be in the fall. I think we have always approached this as a relational and a partnership with the families, and that is, where we've used strategies when we saw low attendance or engagement of dropping notes off on the doors for the students, doing actual home visit, knocking on the door, so that we could check to make sure that the student didn't need something, the parent didn't need extra supports. There is a plan in every school where through the SST teams, Liz Doncaster and her team work with the school-based teams to identify any students who on the engagement side are showing slippage, they're not able to fully engage. Lots of proactivity about reaching out to the families to find out how we can better support them so that they can engage. Really, for us, DCF isn't part of the equation in that whole process. That whole process is really about us using established relationships with our educators and counselors and district folks with the parents. I think in terms of attendance, there is a protocol in place for attendance, as there's always been, whether that is physical or whether that is virtual. And that is where our attendance staff comes in, where, if a student hasn't been in the class, there's a protocol. The teacher kind of escalates that after having tried to reach the parent and find out what's going on. It's escalated through the SST. That student then comes up. Then there's a school using deans of students or using the counselors to do further outreach to try to identify what's going on. And generally, we're able to work through most of the issues. If all of that doesn't, oftentimes, that will get raised to the SSD department, which is Liz Doncaster's, the student support. And that's when, our folks working on attendance will drop a note off at the house, go by, knock on the door, check in. And usually what we find is the family may have relocated and not told anyone. The family may have gone to someone else, to a relative's outside of Somerville, and they're staying with them during the COVID part. And what that then does is it offers us an opportunity to be able to then reach out and say, even if you're over here, how can we still support you? So, really in this, that kind of 16 and under doesn't happen until well down after we've tried everything we can on a relational basis. Our first response is not to contact DCF. It's not even our third or fourth or fifth response. There's lots of that relationship piece that's happening prior to that.
Thank you for that.
Yes.
Ms. Barish, you have a question?
Thank you so much. And thank you to everyone who has spent so many hours and given this so much thought and energy in the superintendent's office and my colleagues and the parents and, like Andre said, the students and the teachers. And it's really heartening to know that we have such a commitment to doing this right. I have a question about the relationship between the various committees that are outlined in the plan. There's the Environmental Health Committee, and then there are the individual school reopening plan committees. And I just wondered if you could speak a little bit to how those groups of people interact, who's on those committees, how those committees were formed, and if there's still room on those committees for parents to join or offer expertise. I mean, we've heard from so many community members who have experience and expertise in areas like virology and epidemiology and things like that. If there's still room for those folks to be involved, how they can do that, who they should contact.
Sure. So, at the beginning, through you, Madam Chair. So at the beginning of this process, we began to engage with a group that's out of the Harvard Business School. And really, we were trying to sort of look at their blueprints relative to national work, how they were working with districts and what kinds of structures, human structures, they were suggesting that we form that would help to allow involvement, help to get multiple types of stakeholders at the table for communication purposes and to get information, but also for us to be able to use thoroughly in planning. And so we really kind of looked at the blueprints that other districts nationally and even in the state were sort of using and adopted some of those for us. I mean, we changed them, we tweaked them. Sometimes we had positions that other districts didn't that we felt could be useful. And so right away, we sort of formed the first foundational team, which was a city district team, to sort of start and really kind of look at the kinds of issues we're talking about, which are things around the buildings and the testing and the broader kinds of structures that aren't just easily solvable. And that I can't say enough for the city working with us in partnership on this. They clearly have done so much good work on the COVID-19 piece. And so we were able to sort of learn from them and to work together. I think then we sort of went to this next phase of, from a district side, having a lot of different kinds of small subcommittees. Some of those were with teachers, like we did grade spans over the summer, where we could really have them pop and address certain types of questions that we saw nationally were the types of questions to be asked about best practice relative to remote learning, as well as other kinds of practices that we felt we could take back and have that inform a reopening plan. One of the committees that we created, within about a little over a month ago, was the environmental and safety. And I think the thinking here was that, as we've said, safety and health are the priority, and it was showing up in different places. It was showing up clearly with the buildings. It was showing up certainly with the COVID testing. It was certainly showing up with the local health protocols that need to happen within the buildings, with our health staff. And showing up relative to metrics and threshold kinds of indicators relative to the virus itself. And so there were just a lot of areas that we knew we needed support with that were cross-sectional, a lot of stakeholders that needed to sort of be on that. So that, meets on a weekly basis. Rebecca Granger and Jeff Curley, Dr. Curley, are the two that really chair that and sort of work with Doug Kress in health services to get a lot of information. And so they're the ones that are really looking at sort of the nitty-gritty of some of those things. And then, knowing for principals, this is a big lift for principals in terms of the buildings. When we start talking about implementation at the building level, it's everything from the signage and thinking through student flow to the furniture to, particular protocols of how does a kid get from here to the nurse's office, where the isolation rooms are, lots of different kinds of mini decisions that need to be made both up front and then certainly in the actual implementation, and then in the communication to the parents. So this is where we created sort of this local stakeholder group or opportunity, which has become the reopening committees. And we used some of the work from the Harvard Business to look at what would be the functions or the roles on that committee. And so really from that was the suggestion around, making sure you've got some administration, some teacher component, some counselor component, custodial or nurse, cafeteria, parents, all within some kind of a ratio so that you don't have one particular voice that's dominating the group, but rather they kind of come in concert and they can talk and look at the kinds of decisions that have to be made. So for that process, it really was sort of working through established structures, like with the parent side, PTA, school site council, or parent council, to say who are some of the parent leaders that really can work in concert and get that information out. And then also, as you rightly say, Somerville is filled with a lot of expertise in a lot of different areas. So in many cases, a principal might have chosen a parent for one of those pieces of expertise. Like earlier in the call, we had Miss McPherson talk about community and community involvement and how to kind of get that jump started or going. So each principal sort of drew from several parent structures to get some parents on there. Additionally, with the teachers, we had a structure where we would have at least one that was a union rep or somebody that is representing the building, in addition to some other teacher voice from the general teacher population, paraprofessional if so existed. So you really have sort of a structure there that's hopefully representative of the school. And it's really in concert that all of these structures are sort of sharing and giving information and update. The primary structure is our cabinet and our principals. So they're constantly meeting. I mean, we meet 2-3 times a week. I'm sure they're tired of meeting with me, but they meet pretty regularly. And the goal of that is to get everybody on the same page and make sure that, as district leaders are making decisions, principals' voices are in that. And principals are also talking with staff to make sure it's reflective of the field and what can happen, so that you really have a systems approach to it. And I think that's been, since day one, the idea of having these various committees. The reopening committee will stay in place all year. And I think our feeling with that is that we don't expect the pandemic to go away, right, anytime soon. And even if there's a vaccine, even if the disease itself comes down in terms of numbers, there's still going to be challenges presented by it. And a lot of the protocols we have in place are going to need to remain in place. So we really see that reopening committee as a year-long work, potentially longer than that. So hopefully that gives you a sense of just sort of the range of the committees and you know, the decisions. Most of the time it has to do with function. So if it's a health and environmental committee, you really, you know, the parents that are on that tend to be parents that either work in the medical field or the health field. They have some interest and relevance to that.
Superintendent, I know I'm not trying to create more work, but it would be helpful whether it was on the school, each individual school, or on the central website. Who are just a list of the names of who
The
are
names,
on those
sure.
committees.
Actually, I know that. Oh, I'm sorry, Chair.
And it just, there are parents who have got great ideas or who have questions who want to know who's on those committees. And while we may not be able to give a firm time frame, we certainly can provide names. And I think any bits of information that we can get out and have as much transparency around all of these processes is very helpful. Mr. Mazza.
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair. I have a list of most of the implementation teams, so I can make sure that we get those up on the websites and we get those communicated, you know, to the community, so we can, you know, offer more voice. By the end of the week, they'll be up on the websites.
That would be super helpful. Thank you so much. Ms. Patone.
I just want to comment that I'm serving on the Environmental Health and Safety Committee for representing the school committee. So in the future, as the agendas permit, either Dr. Curley or Dr. Granger or myself can speak to the work that's being done on that committee. But right now we're really in the forming stage, and there's some really impressive people on that committee. So I just wanted to chime in there so that all the other committee members knew.
It's interesting because there's doctors and then there's doctors, right, on that committee, right? So you gotta have a little bit of flavor of both kinds of doctors on that.
Thank you, and thank you for your time on that committee, Ms. Patone. Ms. Crutchin?
Thank you. My question, I think, is for Dr. Curley, if he is still here, talking about the rec and community schools programs. Two questions about that. One, will there be nurses at the schools when that is happening, even if it's happening outdoors? And my other question is it possible to streamline the signups for both of those? I realize they're two separate organizations. I've just gotten some feedback during our office hours yesterday that from a parent's perspective, it's super frustrating to have to go in and register with the rec department and then go in and register with the community schools and then go in and register with SPS. I realize it may not be possible, but I'm just throwing it out there. If there is any way to streamline that, can we do it?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, through you, Chair Norman. Both are really good questions. So as people probably don't know, currently the nurses do operate under the city's Health and Human Services Department and Doug Kress, but we do have a close working relationship with them, and the plan and the hope is that they will be, as they normally would be, on site for the community schools program at our schools. So that is our typical way of operating. Obviously, everything is newly created in this pandemic, and there will be bargainable working conditions that we have to work through with their union. But the hope and the plan is that nurses will be on site for all of those programs as they would be in a normal year. And as the other question, yes, I should have mentioned our plan is to jointly handle registration for recreation as well as community schools. So our team at community schools has stepped up and said they'll manage that. We're also going to try to manage it, especially for the younger students, in coordination with the cohorts. Again, another key element of this, and we'll put more information out with it, but that such that when students are able to return, if they choose to return, the schedule would work out so they could continue those enrichment activities within their existing schedule. So there is coordination both with the school level and the grade level and those enrichment programs, but the registrations will be centralized. So thank you for both those questions.
And Ms. Barris, did you have a follow-up question to that?
I did. Thank you so much. It's a follow-up to that and also to Ms. Halpenny's comment. And something I was wondering about, is there any way to take into account whether families have any other childcare resource as we decide who can be given spaces in these programs. Thank you.
I think it's a good point and something we'll have to figure out how to consider. It will be part of the agenda for the coming days of how to do that equitably and how to do that recognizing the challenges that all parents are currently facing in this system. But I appreciate it.
Thank you. Ms. Bears, did you have another question or comment? And then I will go to you, Ms. Phillips, and I would encourage all of my colleagues, we have staff is here. If you have any questions, concerns about the reopening proposal, now is the time to raise them. So Ms. Bears and then Ms. Phillips.
Nope, I'm all set for right now. Thank you.
Oh, fantastic. Dr. Phillips?
Thanks. First of all, I just third my colleagues' thanks for the incredible work that all of you at the district, teachers, parents, administrators, central office have been doing to make this reopening as strong and as smooth as possible. It's Herculean, and I really appreciate it. I'm grateful for all the work you do. I don't have a question, I have a comment. It's one I've made to you already this week, so I just want to say it. You know, I have been struck by the work of Sean Reardon, who suggests that achievement gaps, as we know them, are driven in a large part by wealthy families' investments and enrichment opportunities for their kids. And if that's true in normal times, then now, in this moment, it's just kind of blowing those gaps out of the water. So I think our plan as we have it is an incredible first start, better than I would say anything else out there at the state. But as we think about its evolvement and making it better, I would really encourage us to think about those kids whose families can't afford community schools or the rec department, those kids whose families just have to leave them at home all day during remote learning, and what can we do to support them even more than we're supporting every other kid in our district. Thank you.
Yeah. I appreciate that comment. To be clear, is there going to be a fee associated with the rec programming, and
no?
And will there be fees with the community schools as there typically are in this very unusual year that we're having?
Dr. Curley?
So I think Ms. Phillips' point is really well taken, and both programs are waiving fees for this additional work. The city's stepping up and helping us with offering pre-rec programming. The district is working to make the community schools model free and as widely accessible as possible for students. I think it's critical. It's been part of, again, the work that we've been trying to do just to grow this. It's a driving part of inequities in our society of who can afford access to enrichment and after-school programming. And so this is something Superintendent Skipper and the mayor have been very committed to. So I should have been right there. Both of those new programs will be free.
Yeah, I think Dr. Phillips' question though is a really good one, and it's complex. It's what we sort of talked about before, which is how do you define the need at this point? I think, as you guys remember, the state has moved away from what was traditionally, socioeconomic, and it's really an ED formula that only is picking up families that are somehow involved in assistance already. And for a place like Somerville, where we have a large immigrant community, who rightly so, because of national rhetoric, is afraid to draw on services, and or are not documented to feel like they can. You have a whole group of our neediest students and families who are invisible in that calculation. Complicating it further is the fact that at least in the case of East Somerville, Winter Hill, the Healy, Full Circle Next Wave, and the high school, you have schools that have what we call CEP status, or a full universal free and reduced lunch, which means that we don't collect forms in those schools. So it's broken down a bit as to what kind of data to actually use to determine it. if income in and of itself is just the predictor. I'm not sure, given how much has changed since March, whether any of that data would even be relevant anymore, because people have lost jobs, lost homes. So it really does, it's one that, since you and I had the conversation, I've been trying to think about. It's almost like a local indicator that we need to sort of create and to decide how best to do that. In some ways, it's actually the schools that hold that information. They are the ones that the families trust the most to have the conversations. And that's really how we've been trying to get the resources to the kids and the families. No questions asked is that way. So we will not let up on this particular piece, because I think it's relevant now more than ever. So I do appreciate that comment.
Oops, I had myself muted. I have, Laura, is that a follow-up question to this? I know that you also, it is, okay. I will take the follow-up question, then go to Mr. Green, and then come back for your original question. Fantastic, okay.
Thank you, Chair Norman. First of all, I want to thank my colleagues, Ms. Phillips and Ms. Barish, for bringing this up. One of the things that I'm particularly sensitive or concerned about in this context of providing access is that many of our families are not going to be aware that these are free and they're access, that they can access them. That's one of the challenges, is that their access to information is limited compared to other families. And the only way I see this really happening is if there's direct outreach done, and that within the buildings that the support teams, the teachers, the administrators are identifying students and doing direct outreach and offering it. And possibly, I know you guys will figure it out as best you can, but possibly offering it to them before it gets to a general registration. But consider how you can do it. But that's just one of the things I've seen in the past, is that when we do registration, it's the people who have that access and who have that information are the ones that are going to sign up. Not to say that we don't want them to participate as well. Of course, as you said, all families, and families that we might not even traditionally realize are struggling. So anyway, it's just something to factor in, is that this may require outreach, and obviously outreach takes time and money, and we don't have a ton of time. So thank you for considering that, and I'll take my question when I'm in the queue again. Thank you.
Thank you. So Mr. Green, and then we'll be back to Ms. Patone.
May I ask a follow-up?
Sure, Dr. Ackman.
Thank you.
Is it related to this topic?
I think so, and
Okay.
you can tell me if it's not, and I will resend it. I was curious if there are accommodations being made for students with disabilities, if there's going to be specific staff at these camps who will be able to support it, or if we don't know yet, that's fine. But I'm curious about that.
Superintendent?
Through you, Madam Chair. So Director Trevisoni and I have been talking about this. You know, community schools, we made a pretty strategic switch 4 years ago, maybe 5, when we sort of realized that not all students were able to be easily served through community schools. And so we built out a position that really was intended to help support and train staff so that students with disabilities could access, same with ELL students. And so with CS, we have a pretty good foundation to be able to do that. I think with REC, we're working on that. And so Director Trevisoni and I have been talking about what might be some of the potential contract service we might be able to bring in to be able to support students once we see sort of who has signed up, so that we know what's needed. So it is in progress, but we do have a commitment to it.
Ms. Trevisoni, did you want to add anything? I just saw your face pop up. Nope, and gone.
Right.
I'm just always ready, just in case, Carrie.
Okay.
We're also going to reach out to, through you, we're going to reach out to Parks and Crafts, and I've already reached out to Tufts and some other agencies to see if we can get some college students to come in and support us. So we're already on it.
Thank you for that. Mr. Green, thank you for your patience, and your question is?
Sure, I think I'm going to bring up the elephant in the room. So I 100% agree with the fact that we cannot and should not set arbitrary timelines for shifting between phases as it's driven by health requirements and health metrics. The question I do have is there a plan or a timeline which the community might know what those metrics are.
Through Madam Chair.
Please.
So it's a great question. It's what is the timeline for the timeline? So I think the answer is that, as Rich Raish said earlier, we do expect some real pivotal information this week and next on the building side. So I think once we get a look at that, and we can analyze it, and he can put some numbers to it to say, in these buildings it'll take this long, in these buildings it'll take this long. I think that will be one of the primary drivers. I think the second is obviously the COVID testing system, which I know the city is diligently working on right now. So I think those two, over the next 2 weeks, we will get some concrete information for the timeline then from that point on. I think the virus, crystal ball, no idea. I mean, this is, I think the indicators and the threshold, that is something also that we're actively, or the city's actively working toward. And I do think that is sooner rather than later will be one of the things that will be made sort of revealed. So I do think we're making good progress in these areas. It's just, I think the unknown in this is obviously what happens with the virus itself, right?
But thank you. I will say, as I'm attending the reopening Monday morning city and school meetings, it is a question that is often asked repeatedly, and we are seeking it, and once we have it, we will become public and transparent. And I appreciate you asking that question, Mr. Green. Ms. Patone.
Thank you, Chair Norman, through you to the superintendent and possibly to Ms. Trevisone. I had a question about our students with special needs. This is separate from, the phasing, where students are, identified that the students with the highest needs would be entered first. But thinking of the students that particularly have behavioral, social, attention issues, executive function challenges, who are also at pretty high risk to not perform well within remote learning environments. I'm not judging or questioning about the phasing, but I'm all seeking whether or not at some level in the next stage of the plan, whether these students would be considered to come in for in-person services, whether it's outside, because I know the plan is probably just not at that level, but I guess I want to advocate for that. We have many students that are don't fit in the profile of the phasing and would go in with their regular ed grade, but could really utilize and benefit from in-person direct services. Thank you.
Right, so I'll take a quick stab at the beginning, but then ask Director Trevisone to join in. So in terms of just the outside, one of the public comments was around the outside, and it certainly is not dropped off. I think what we're trying to figure out is how to use the outdoors in a coordinated way. Now that we've got sort of rec and community schools, and now from an academic standpoint, wanting to be able to set up and use some of it, we just need to coordinate what that looks like. But I do think, we have brought this up, and I think STA has been open about this, and I think the next step is, we're going to be talking with STA about what that could look like, who would be present, how many students could come, what would the physical setup look like outside. We're in the process of getting tents, both for this purpose, but then also now for rec. And so how can the tents be used for this, to be able to do that kind of safe social distancing work with the students. And then in that, who are the students that need to come, right? Who are the students that need to come first? And is there a variation between what we've said about the program students versus students that may be embedded, but also sort of really can't wait as long as when their grade is called. So I think those will be the things as we start to look at what the outdoors can look like. As you can imagine, when you're ordering things, the layers of ordering have everything to do with setting contracts up to availability of the items. And we're not the only one that had the bright idea of using the outside. So I think, we're now vying, even though we're a little bit ahead in the queue, we're still vying with a lot of other places that are trying to do this as well. So again, we want to set it up to succeed. So even something like the supervision of the students in the outdoors for a student that might have a lot of pent energy, might be prone to run, or might be prone to need to get up and move around, what does supervision of that student look like? If for the teacher, they've got 3 or 4 kids coming, right? What's the appropriate adult ratio in that setting? So there's lots of like little mini decisions that have to be made about that one scenario. But we are looking actively at the outdoor. And Director Trevisoni, I don't know if there's anything you want to add specifically about the programming.
So I think that what I've been doing is I've started a planning and brainstorming group with about 30 special educators. It includes speech and language, OT, represents across the district. And we've already begun to plan and think about what do services look like, if we can go back, if we can do any face-to-face, even phased, or much like you said, Laura, if we could do some outdoor services, how would that look like? Who would the students be? How would we provide that? I do want to back up Superintendent Skipper with regards to safety. You know, when you're outside, it's a wide open space. I've been trying to set up an outdoor space for testing, and I can tell you it's going to be on Cross Street, and every time I'm ready to go, there's another construction vehicle that's out there, right? There's another street that's broken down. So there's so many layers to making sure that we have to, for the sensory stuff, what is the noise around, how many people are around, what's happening around there. So there's a lot to plan, but we've already begun to plan with this team, and we're looking forward to doing whatever we can to bring kids back as soon as possible.
Thank you. I have Ms. Barish and then Ms. Krepchen.
Thank you so much. I feel like we've sort of approached this topic a couple of times, but haven't quite hit it yet. And I know that the superintendent's updates are offered in translation on the website. And I just wondered, I mean, this 67-page plan is dense. I can only imagine that trying to translate it would take a whole lot of time and energy. But I'm wondering how all of the information in this plan is being communicated to families for whom English isn't the home language. And if there's any way we can help support that.
Yeah, so through you, Madam Chair. So this is a conversation that we're actively having, whether it's creating executive summaries of the parts. So it's sort of the main points, if it's bullets, but it is sort of the next layer of making sure that the plan is accessible in the various languages. So we hope to have an update for you within about a week on what our plan with this would be. More importantly, also, as the plan changes, how to ensure that the community gets those relevant updates. Clearly, SFLC and our multilingual division is going to be key in helping us to push the messaging out to families.
Thank you for that. Ms. Krepchen?
So my question is about the LMS, and what is it going to cost the district? Do we pay a single licensing fee that we can then use multiple students? Are we paying per student? And I realize you don't have a crystal ball, but based on your conversations with parents, are you predicting that like 10 parents are going to take this option or 300 parents are going to take this option? And again, I recognize you don't have exact numbers. I'm just curious what your sense is. Thank you.
So I know, through you, Madam Chair, I know Mr. Mazza is dying to talk about the LMS.
I already turned on my microphone.
So I'll let him talk a little bit about how the pricing works. But in terms of the prediction with the parents, I mean, I think it's a double screen, right? I think one is that we've tried to give as much accurate information about who it's relevant to and who it's not a good fit for. But then on top of that, part of why I want to sort of do this mini check system is to then have Mr. Mazza be able to have a conversation with the families so that we can ensure this isn't just a kid sitting on the other end of a system that there's nobody checking in, there's no academic support, and then a whole quarter will go by and then the student will come back having not learned anything. So we want to make sure that it really is for, geared for the students that have that support. As far as the numbers go, I mean, it's hard to say. I can say that in this past month, as parents have reached out, I've probably gotten myself 20 to 30 parents that have like emailed and indicated that they were looking for something like an LMS. Now, whether all of those parents, go through with it, whether some of those parents now are going to do the hybrid, we just don't know. I think had it been a choice where from the start you pick the LMS or you pick hybrid, I think if we had not clarified that by default we're starting with hybrid, then I think we probably would have had a bunch of parents pick it, not fully understanding it, and then we would have had to help them get over into the hybrid. I feel much better knowing that the hybrids are default and that really it's an intentional choice on the LMS and an opportunity to talk through it to make sure it is that good fit. But I don't know, if I had to guess in our district of 5,000 students, I'm going to guess 50 to 75 students will probably fall into this. That's my guess. Yeah. So we'll see.
So through you, Madam Chair, so they're both different. Edgenuity, we pay a yearly school site fee. So that covers the entire school. It covered the Full Circle high school students as well. This year, what we did is we would just add the CTE component to the licensing fee, which would be around an additional $3,000, but it would cover all of our CTE students, so they would have opportunities to learn from the various classes that are offered by Edgenuity. So, for that one, it's for the entire school. It's a set price, and then we had the additional for the CTE this year. I mean, they also offer, SEL courses. They offer a bunch of different things, but I know our team head by Liz Doncaster has a great lineup of social emotional supports for the district. So for the Florida Virtual School, it's a little different. You pay by student license at a minimum of 25 licenses. So depending on how many you have, after 25, you pay what the license costs, which I think is $199. It's not, not that expensive, at all, but, and you get the core courses with it. So, and you get your phys ed, you get your technology, you get all the other courses, the electives that you would want. So it's a pretty good deal for us. It didn't make sense to try to do an enterprise, license, because kids would be out in all different schools and it just wouldn't work that way. So it was much easier and made more sense just to go with the student-based license.
Yeah.
Did that help?
I mean, I thought you did a great job with that. I think the Edgenuity, we've had that for years. I mean, that has been the platform for ELP, and then we've since extended it for Scale, for Full Circle. And, I think in that case, you don't really have students using the full suite of courses. What you have is students using courses that they need to make the credit up. Occasionally, we will have students take it for enrichment. Like there'll be a course that Somerville High doesn't offer and they want to be able to take it. So you'll see it like in a very targeted use or way. And again, how we support it looks different by the program. If you're in Full Circle Next Wave, it's enveloped as part of the program. If you're in ELP, there's 2 lead instructors and tutors. If you're at Somerville High, often it's with tutors. So, but there's always a support to it because it's, even kids that are super independent and autonomous, they still hit those parts of the content that they need the extra support. So we will likely put some kind of tutoring mechanism in place for this, particularly in the math courses, because the math and some of the higher level sciences are the ones that generally the kids get stuck. The Florida Virtual, as Chad said, it's generally a per user license. We would never have a magnitude of users that would trigger using an enterprise license where you just sort of can use it across the district. There are some districts that are doing that, right? Some districts are not going to support the remote side of the hybrid. They're going to instead just offer the LMS. No judgment, just that's their plan. And in those cases, it does make sense to do more of an enterprise because you're offering that license everywhere. So.
I'm going to call on myself for a question. So our students who were in the ELP, the Extended Learning Program, pre-pandemic, Yeah. What is happening with them? Do we have other students who are being who are moving into that program? Does it still exist? What does it look like in the world of COVID?
Oh, it still exists. And
Okay.
just a huge shout out to Joel and to his staff. I think we had more students graduate from ELP in the past year than we did previously, just because of sheer hard work on their part, working with kids. I mean, they literally follow the kids every day, multiple texts, you know, there's no escape. It's, you know, they really want you to be able to graduate. I think what has been interesting to watch with ELP here is that we've also had some students who are overaged but younger classmen students. So they might be a freshman or a sophomore off track. So they might be 17 years old and very few high school credits. And again, through remarkable work of Joel and the staff, they've gotten the kids back on track. And sometimes the kid goes back into Somerville High, goes back into Full Circle, or sometimes the student remains with the program and eventually graduates. And I think 2 or 3 of our late graduates that happened in September were examples of students that had been sort of their career trajectory, high school trajectory. So that is just great work. It's the counseling support, it's the wraparound. So they right now, I believe, I think they can take about 15 students into the program, and this would, you know, be the time that Somerville High and Full Circle would be going through transcripts, meeting with students and families to discuss how to use ELP to get back onto track. So very much happening.
Thank you for that. Mr. Mazza, was your hand up? Mr. Mazza.
It was, through you, Madam Chair. Just one quick point about the ELP. I mean, that speaks to the importance of forming relationships with students. Honestly, you know, when you watch Joel and his team work with students coming from difficult situations, you know, in all different facets, and they sit and they learn about the students, they form relationships, they keep in touch, and like Superintendent Skipper said, they track them down if they're not showing up, and they you know, facilitate that motivation in the students. So whenever we think that relationships do not matter, it's a prime example of they do. They do, and they do, and they do.
I would just like to note that there are some members of that team who are on this call with us tonight, and even though ELP is not often talked about, I hope you all know how deeply we appreciate all of your efforts. It is, having known several students who have used it, who have gone through it, and so those of you on the call tonight, here's a shout out to you. So thank you so much for that. Other questions and comments about this proposal? We also have another proposal for later to consider a new policy that came out of rules on Friday. So I don't want to rush this deliberation, but I also know that we have other things. So if there are more concerns or questions, I am happy to entertain them. Ms. Patel.
Thank you, Chair Norman. I just have kind of a little statement to make. I tried to write something up, but I will do my best to do it off the cuff. You know, in the interest of educating our students, the district is responsible to create this plan, which should rightly include some level of in-person learning based on our common understanding that in-person is the most effective way for our students to learn. The actual implementation of the in-person learning part of the plan will be based on creating and implementing science and data-informed clear safety parameters to minimize risk. So a lot of the conversation seems to not acknowledge that we marry both of those things. So in-person learning is predicated on making sure that we've minimized the risk in our schools. And I think that the district and the city have done such an impressive job at explaining and being transparent about those parameters, including, you know, a virus testing plan that can be implemented that is statistically, you know, significant, retrofitting of buildings to make sure that we're meeting our ventilation and filtering needs, and, you know, the clarity on what indicators we're going to use in terms of the progress of the virus in our community, as well as implementing safety measures at the point where if we decide to go in person, that the district has created some really solid safety measures. That all said, so that's just sort of context setting for me. I deeply care about our students and our staff. And I understand that for some educators and families, in-person learning is too risky. And I think that the district has done an excellent job to acknowledge that in the plan. And I'm incredibly devastated by the fear and loss that so many are experiencing, and the unreasonable decisions that we're forced to consider and make. This is just, the circumstances are untenable and devastating for so many. So that's some context for me, and I want to kind of wrap that all up by saying that, my thanks to everyone who's participating, administrators, our educators, our families, for their engagement and commitment, for their focus and their attention to sort of the science and data, flexibility, patience, and the last one, which is compassion. I feel like it's incredibly important that we are compassionate to each other with all these different perspectives that we're all dealing, all the fears that we all have, and that they're real. So I just wanted to put that parameter there for myself. I wanted to express it. I feel like I'm so thankful that I've been able to hear all this public comment, but this, I guess, is my opportunity to make a little bit of a public comment statement that I support this plan. I know there's a lot more details to be hammered out. I support the fact that we're going through a good and thoughtful collective bargaining process, because that is incredibly important. I know some families don't quite understand, but when you change working conditions, you're responsible to engage your staff in that process. And so I'm thankful, as challenging as it can be, I'm super thankful for it. And so I just wanted to, voice my support and thank, as well as my colleagues, for all of their engagement in this process. So that's it, I'm done.
Thank you for those comments. Anyone else looking to weigh in, comments, questions about the proposal? Are we ready to vote? Any last call? Okay. Can we get a roll call vote on this proposal, please?
My pleasure. Dr. Phillips?
Yes.
Ms. Krepshin?
Yes.
President McLaughlin? Mayor Curtatone? Mr. Green?
Yes.
Ms. Barish?
Yes.
Ms. Patone?
Yes.
Dr. Ackman?
Yes.
And Ms. Norman?
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Madam Chair, can I just also just publicly thank for a minute? I just want to publicly thank Dr. Granger and Susanna Hernandez-Morgan for really authoring and just being extremely patient with a lot of the changes, particularly strategy changes, which are often throughout the paper, but also just, really to all of the district admin, the school-based admin, for, just really multiple times a week going through to strive to make the best decisions. And to all the staff that in many ways, whether it was through PD they took in feedback, or whether it was through some of the grade span components, or just emails or public comment. But I think really, parents and our staff help to shape and give really good feedback along the way, which when taken helps to make the best plan possible. So this is really a Somerville plan. It's done the way that we typically do it, in terms of, not easy and arguing and loving at the same time, but you get to the other end and it represents a better product. And I think that's what, we feel about it, and that it's not done, right? We still will strive to make it better and to have it reflect the changes that are going to be made, but it really does reflect so many people's work. So just a huge shout out to everybody on it.
I would echo that, having read many of the drafts along the way. I would say Dr. Granger and Ms. Hernandez-Morgan not only did phenomenal amounts of work and with patience, they had grace and good humor, and that is not easy. I think everyone at every, our children, our staff, everyone here is struggling. You have a good day, and then the uncertainty of so many variables, and then you see districts around us going red, and for better or for worse, COVID has really highlighted how profoundly intertwined our lives are. I know I've said this before, but also how individual our needs are. And for that, I am grateful to be living here. I would say with the lack of leadership at higher levels, at both the state and the federal level, it has compounded this process. And I will leave it there to say that locally we've had to become experts in things that we never thought we would be as a school system or even as city employees. And we've stepped up, and our experts in our community are also stepping up. So a huge round of thanks for that. And I would particularly like to thank Superintendent Skipper, because I know when I'm getting texts from her at 7 in the morning, her day has already started, and it's been long, and I just hope we can continue to engage in this process and be in it together, everybody as a community. Okay, so more good fun for us tonight. Item number 4, new business. Somerville Public School Policy Manual, and the following policy is being presented, this evening for first reading as amended. It's the emergency 1-year leave of absence and school placement hold policy. Dr. Ackman, as chair of rules, would you like to speak to it? And I would also like to thank members of our rules committee. This was brought up as an idea only last Monday at the full committee, school committee. The rules committee met on Friday and worked out this draft and moved it to us. So Dr. Ackman, if you would like to speak to it, and if any other members of the rules committee would also like to speak to it, I'm sure Dr. Curley is somewhere here too.
So thank you. Chair Norman, if it's okay with you. Hi, Dr. Curley. I'd like to read it. It's not that long. And sort of as I read it, there are a few specific changes we made in responses to specific questions and comments that we had during the subcommittee meeting, so that we get that out of the way, so that hopefully it preemptively addresses some questions that my colleagues might have.
That would be very helpful. Thank you.
Okay.
Oh, that'd be great. Thank you.
Here we go. All right. Given the unprecedented circumstances of educating children during a global pandemic, the Somerville School Committee authorizes the superintendent or her designees at the enrollment center to allow for students who have unenrolled after August 4th, 2020, the date that the district announced a remote start for the 2020-2021 academic year, to have a seat held for children in their current school. I'm going to stop there. The reason why the August 4th date was put forth is that staff at the enrollment office, once the district made this announcement, started getting more questions about this and have started making note of the families that had those concerns. My understanding is that prior to that date, families that may have unenrolled due to issues of, being concerned about enrollment and coronavirus, they have no way of documenting that. So that is why that date was chosen. We dug into it, and it seems like that is the earliest possible date that we can go with. So the date that the district announced a remote start for the 2020-2021 academic year, to have a seat held for children in their current school if currently enrolled in grades K through 7 through July 1, 2021, if the student's guardian requests as such. The July 1st deadline is again something that was mentioned actually by, I think, our new superintendent intern, who I hope the superintendent, introduces broadly. And he brought up that, we we need a start date that works for the enrollment center. This was the latest possible start date because we wanted to do as much as we could to accommodate families, or the latest possible enrollment date that would work for the enrollment center. So that is why that July 1st, 2021 date is in there. Students currently registered in pre-K can have their seats held for the duration of the 2020-2021 academic year if the student's guardian requests as such. For students in transition grades who make use of this policy, the district will still contact them at the same time as they do registered students regarding their lottery preferences for the 2021-2022 academic year. This option will apply to all students in special programs. Upon re-entry, updated immunization, physical examination, and proof of residency documents are required. Sorry, I navigated away so I could read. I'm back on.
Thank you. I just lost my train of thought. Okay, I'm happy to take questions, or if there's anything from either Dr. Curley, who also staffs the Rules Committee, or the superintendent would like to add at the start of this discussion. And I see you having questions, Ms. Crutchen.
I just wanted to, oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Why don't we start with questions and see if that gets us where we need to go.
Okay. Just a quick question that came up in public comment as well is, does this affect sibling preference in any way?
Through Madam Chair, I mean, my recommendation would be no. I mean, we never want to separate siblings, so I wouldn't see why we would start that practice now.
Ms. Baton?
Thank you, Chair Norman. Through you to either Dr. Ackman or the superintendent. I just wanted to clarify transition grades. Is that the pre-K to K transition, the 5th to 6th transition for the Brown students? Is there some other transition I'm not aware of?
No, I mean, well, obviously 8th to 9th, but that's not as part of this. But no, I mean, Dr. Curley, was anything else discussed in terms of transition?
No, through you, Chair, that's right. We were thinking of pre-K and the students coming from 5th grade to Brown into middle grades.
Ms. Barish and then Ms. Phillips.
I may be embarrassing myself because I'm remembering this wrong, but I believe Capuano also has kindergarten students. Is that true? And would that also, they would also be impacted by the transition grade? Because they have to be placed in 1st grade, right? I was hoping I remembered that right.
Yeah, they have 2 classes of kindergarten that would need to be addressed. Yes.
Good attention to detail, Ms. Barish. Did you have a follow-up, or does that answer your question?
No, I just wanted to comment briefly just on the level of commitment that Ms. Bertoldo shows, I mean, every day, but particularly in this meeting, when I raised concern about whether families, if they had, left the district temporarily, would know about the deadline of July 1st, and she said that they would be reaching out to these families to make sure that if they were coming back, our district knows about it. And I just thought that was just such a testament to the values we have here. So,
thank you, Dr. Phillips.
Yeah, one of the things that we wrestled with during rules but held off until this meeting was whether we wanted to signal in the policy itself or some other way what, if any, consequences the decision to unenroll your student would have on the district's budget for the following year. I'm wondering, I've been getting a lot of questions from constituents about, if I choose to enroll, is there a magic date in October and then the funding will be secured? So I think folks would appreciate some clarification of what the ramifications of unenrolling your student are and if doing it by one date or another is better for the community.
Superintendent, you want to take that?
So through you, Madam Chair. So I see that, speaking of Ms. Bataldo, she is actually on the call, so she could turn her camera on so that we can see her. And I think what we would want, hello, Ms. Bataldo, how are you?
Hello. Good.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Ms. Bataldo can correct me if I'm wrong, but October 1st is generally the snapshot for Sims that we report our enrollment. Good night,
Mm-hmm. That's correct.
Is that correct, Ms. Bataldo? Okay.
Yes, it is.
Thanks, Regina. So October 1st would be the date at point which that we would report our students. There are 4 cycles during the year that we have to do enrollment, and it's based actually on charters and when the charter pickup is. But October 1st is the first one.
Dr. Phillips.
So just a follow-up, does that mean that any child that takes advantage of this policy before October 1st, they're essentially reducing our foundation budget by 1 child for the following year?
Yeah, I mean, that's the snapshot that sets the foundation budget. It is.
So for people who don't know and who don't follow foundation budgets as closely, so our enrollment in this October will determine what we get for funding in the following fiscal year. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So it is not, we won't see an immediate drop, but that the thing that keeps me up at night often is the FY22 budget. For a host of reasons, including this one, because that's when we will feel the impact is in the following year.
Mm-hmm.
Ms. Bataldo, did you want to add anything? If not,
No, that's correct.
okay. So I have Ms. Patone, Dr. Ackman, and then Mr. Green.
This is just a quick follow-up, and I apologize if you've covered this already. Unenrolling is different than choosing to do option 2, the LMS. So if someone chooses to do the LMS, which is, an asynchronous, staying with the curriculum, but doing your own work with your traveling in the RV to Grand Canyon or whatever you want, you are still considered an enrolled student in Somerville Public Schools, and there is no negative impact to our foundation budget.
Correct. I mean, I think the distinction is if you're a homeschool student, homeschool is not part of the district. You're submitting a plan by statute to Chad's office, and that plan kind of gets held and authorized, but you're not part of the district in that way or counted on the foundation side. If you are using the LMS as one of the district options, there would be some loose connection and support through Chad's office. And then, of course, in terms of the grading, we would accept that grading and fold that grading in relative to promotion and to transcript. So much like happens currently with Edgenuity for students that are fully enrolled in Edgenuity as opposed to classes. So the LMS would be part of us. And this is the distinction we've made, that whether it's the LMS or whether you're in the hybrid, and whichever choice you make in the hybrid, we do intend to let you have access to either REC or the CS programs that are through us, through the schools, as well as the potential with the art and music to do some elective stuff. So there is a distinction. Yeah.
Thank you. Dr. Ackman, and then we'll go to Mr. Green.
I'd like to let Mr. Green go first.
Mr. Green.
So I actually just have some procedural questions.
Yes.
Namely, do we intend to meet next week, or should we suspend the rules to pass tonight?
Okay. There is not a meeting on the schedule for next week, and if the mood of
the body is moving towards this, I
move to
would,
suspend the rules
I would
to pass on first reading.
Second.
Do we need to take a, yes, we do need to take a roll call vote. So there's a motion by Mr. Green to suspend the rules, seconded by Ms. Patone. Can we get a roll call vote? And thank you, Mr. Green, for being on top of the procedural details.
Can I make a quick comment?
Yes.
I just want to generally say I'm not a big fan of suspending the rules, but in this case, I think it's pretty straightforward. And this is something that families are really looking for, to understand what their choices are and what their impact is. I think that the rules team did an excellent job in describing this, and you've answered all their questions. So like I said, I tend to be the one saying don't suspend the rules, but I'm way supportive of this, so thank you.
I tend to agree with Ms. Patone, and I'm not a fan of suspending rules or doing things quickly, although everything about this year is unusual, and there is as much information as options as we can provide our families as quickly as, and thoroughly as possible. I would say this is also in a policy that has a time limit on it. We don't know where we'll be in next year. It's not a permanent change. And so we will be revisiting it if we are not back to normal. So that makes it a little bit more easy for me to say, let's move that forward. So we can get a roll call vote on suspending the rules, please.
Sure. Dr. Phillips?
Yes.
Ms. Krepshin?
Yes.
President McLaughlin, Mayor Curtatone, Mr. Green,
Yes.
Ms. Barish,
Yes.
Ms. Patone,
Yes.
Dr. Ackman,
Yes.
and Ms. Norman.
Yes.
Motion carries. Rules are suspended.
Thank you so much for that. Dr. Ackman?
So I think I was negligent in the beginning of this, and I just wanted, once I saw the glowing Ms. Bertoldo, I wanted to thank her in front of everyone for her quick and thoughtful work and response on this. She was a real partner, and so was Dr. Boston Davis and Dr. Curley, like really unspeakably amazing. And I just want to be sure that I like very publicly thank you for helping us get this through thoughtfully and quickly.
I'm just going to jump into like our ELP, like there's many components of our school district that are often invisible. The work that the PIC does in terms of reaching out individually and persistently to families is outstanding and deeply, deeply appreciated. So thank you, and thank you for yet another very late night. We enjoy seeing your smiling face, and we know that you have another full day of work in front of you. So are there any other questions or comments on this?
Move to approve the policy.
Actually, I do have something.
Dr. Ackman.
Thank you. Sorry, Ed, I just thought of it. This has not been run by legal counsel, and so through the chair, through you, I don't know if we want to approve it pending legal counsel approval or if we're comfortable with it as is, but I did want to float that.
Move to approve the policy as is.
Is there?
Sorry, I was unmuted. I move to approve the policy as is.
Is there a second?
I'll
Would
second.
any? So there's
Sorry,
a motion
Alana,
by
I second.
Mr. Green. Thank you. Seconded by Ms. Krepchin. Can I get a roll call vote on this motion?
Point of order.
Oh, yes. Thank
Do
you.
we need
And
it?
then
Do we, in the opinion of the superintendent, do we need an amendment to make the sibling preference clear, or does policy as is cover it since sibling preference is already standard policy?
Through Madam Chair, I don't think we need to. I do think siblings follow siblings. So as long as we're following that part of our policy, we should be fine. The one thing I would suggest just on this legal question is whether we could say approval pending final authorization by, you know, our lawyer. If you want us to have him give a quick look. That way,
So
Chair,
That's my preference.
I can set that as a friendly amendment. I think, as a matter of procedure, I think that's always implicit, is that if our lawyers say this doesn't stand, but sure.
But typically, we would have a lawyer look at it before, and we are waiving a second reading, and so I would ask Mr. Green as the maker of the motion to let it stand.
I'm fine with that.
Okay, are you withdrawing your motion to let it stand? And then, do we need to have another one that says pending?
I'm accepting the superintendent's question as a friendly amendment.
Thank you. Perfect. Okay, so can we get a roll call vote on Mr. Green's with the friendly amendment of the superintendent's? That's fantastic. Thank you for getting us out of that quagmire.
all right, Dr. Phillips,
Yes.
Ms. Krepshin,
Yes.
Mr. Green,
Yes.
Ms. Barish,
Yes.
Ms. Patone,
Yes.
Dr. Ackman,
Yes.
Ms. Norman,
Yes.
President McLaughlin, and Mayor Curtatone. Motion carries.
Okay, so we now have the motion as amended. Is there any further discussion on the entire motion?
I thought we were
Policy. Wait.
good. We just passed it.
Oh, look at us. Okay, I'm starting to have a spasm in my neck, and I'm not at the top of my game. So, thank you for getting that piece of work done. Thank you, Regina, as always, for joining us. That takes us to item number 5, items from board members. Seeing Ms. Patone.
First, I have a quick question. Is the immunization one, we're not going over that tonight? Policy? But I also have an item from board members. It's up to you. Did I miss something? I just don't know. I assumed it was on the agenda because it was in the packet.
It wasn't in the agenda that got sent out, but it was passed out of committee, so we didn't know that we'd be able to pass it out of the committee that quickly, and because of the timeline, things went out. You know, Chair Norman, it's up to you whether you want this to be the first reading or not.
Ms. Patone, did you want
I
to
was
say?
going to say, if it's not on the agenda, I didn't notice that, so I apologize. I'm assuming if it's not on the agenda, we're not doing it unless.
Typically not. Superintendent, what is the time frame and the need of getting this policy? And is this also something that we need to run by legal counsel?
We do need to run this, through you, Madam Chair, we do need to run this by legal counsel. I do think that this is something that we would want to have in effect for the beginning of school. So we do have a couple of weeks, but I would, want to make sure that we can effectively pass it within the first 2 meetings. Dr. Curley, would you agree with that assessment?
Yes.
Mr. Green.
I assure you that no one wants to vote yes on this policy more than I do, and as soon as possible. But especially given the subject matter and the, shall we say, vehemence on the subject that some people may have on it, I think it's probably extra important that we make sure all our I's are dotted and T's are crossed. And so I'd say if we didn't put it on the agenda tonight, we shouldn't discuss it.
I was not considering to take it up tonight. I'm trying to understand what the steps we need to have done to complete before we put it on, and I would like to put it on the next agenda, which is not next week, but the
the last Monday in October. I mean, October. Feels like October, August. But in that interim, I would like to make sure that we have as much coordination and information, both from our legal counsel, but also from the Department of Health and Human Services, and that we are, whatever the city may be putting out as standards, that we have as much information from as many of the contributing bodies, or that we can get information from beforehand. So it will be on the next agenda, the next meeting's agenda. But thank you for raising that. Excuse me very much. And you had another item, Ms. Patone? Yes.
Yes. So it's more an item of information. I've been in correspondence with one of our state reps, Denise Provo, who let me know that there's currently a bill to put a pause on the MCAS requirement. It is going to, I think testimony can be submitted through 8/19, which is this Wednesday. So it's not something that we can do anything about as a body because it's not on our agenda. But I did want to let my colleagues know about it. It's, and I don't, I'm not creating an opinion here about, whether or not someone should support this or not, but it's H.4947 relative to a moratorium on the MCAS in response to COVID-19 emergency. I can forward contact information for the chair people. I'd ask her clerk to get that for me so I can share that with the committee, but with like I said, no opinions, no deliberation. I did want to ask the superintendent if she had any thoughts about this topic with respect to our district. I understand if you're not prepared to talk about it because we texted like an hour ago. So if you have nothing to say, that's completely fine because I'm sure you have not read the bill. But I did want to let my colleagues know about that. Thank you.
Madam Chair, so my understanding is there's actually two bills. One is a debate bill and the other is a House bill, and they actually call for different things. And I have not had opportunity to read both of them. My understanding with the House bill is that it calls for a 1 to 2 moratorium, but I'm not sure which of those, a year or two. And I believe that the debate one may call for a longer period of time. So I would want to have an opportunity to read those to be able to give my full opinion. I think in general, it is reasonable to say that this is going to be a very different year, and to hold students and educators to the same standards as a normal year isn't realistic. So in this way, I think we need to think about what the goals of accountability are, what the role of assessment is, and how we use them responsibly. But I'm happy to give more information once I have a chance to read them and vet them. But that would, that to me is just sort of the, I would hope that the Department of Ed would be looking at both of those things, the role of accountability and the role of assessment, and thinking about in this environment how to be able to do both responsibly.
I would also ask for, I'm not expecting an answer from the state, and there's a recurring theme with me tonight, but also which grades does this affect? Is it this year's 10th graders, last year's 10th graders? What's the span of who's going to be accountable for what in what year? And it is a question that is coming up more and more, not just for our kids who may not have passed it and still who are no longer in 10th grade, but for our last year's 10th graders who didn't take it, this year's 10th graders, what's going to happen? I mean, this is going to be a multi-year question. And so any clarity we can get from the state would be deeply appreciated. Are there any other, Ms.
I'm going to follow up with, I'm going to email everybody whatever information I have. You make your own decisions about what you want to do or not want to do about supporting or not supporting that. So thanks.
Thank you. I would just like to quickly raise my concern about the way that the FY22 foundation budget will be considered from the state, and at a future meeting whether we would want to consider lobbying the state to reconsider how that formula is going to be calculated, because this is going to be a tricky year, whether students are unenrolling and holding on, or absenteeism, however that is calculated. Mr. Green?
Just to speak to that really quickly, members should be aware that a group of legislators led by our own Senator Jalen, is already looking at that very question. There are proposals to put a bill to state that next year's foundation budget would be based on last year's numbers, not this year's numbers. So basically giving a statewide hold harmless on attendance numbers for this year. I just want to add, for the purposes of people who, again, may not pay attention to how foundation budgets work, thanks to the fact that the foundation formula hasn't been changed in 1993, when Somerville is a very different community than it is now. Somerville is famously underserved by the foundation budget, to the point where, you know, Cambridge, with its substantially larger tax base, gets far more money from the state than we do. So normally that's a terrible thing, but in the years to come, that may be a good thing. So like this year's budget, which they still haven't passed and won't pass until after the elections, a hold harmless or even a mild cut doesn't hurt Somerville as much as it will hurt other communities. And similarly, our budget, because it's so tight, doesn't get hit as hard by population fluctuations as other cities and towns do.
Thank you for that information. More to come on that. Any other items from board members? With that, is there anything else? Am I forgetting anything?
Death notice?
Oh, thank you, Dr. Ackman. Do you have condolences?
Yep, condolences. The Somerville School Committee would like to send its deepest condolences to the family of Georgia Arvanis, special education teacher at the Healy School.
We are adjourned. Thank you all for your work. Be well.
Thank you guys. Have a good night.
You too.